So, thank you those that are viewing by YouTube. We just want to greet you to the fiscal 2014 proposed budget meeting with the board. So, and at this time, we will move to Mr. Dick Phoebus, Director of the Bartlett Finance Department. Dick.
Thank you, Mayor, and appreciate the Aldermen being here for this session. It's going to be a good session, I hope. Very informative. As the Mayor said, please hold questions at the end of each presentation. We'll have a number of speakers today, so you won't have to listen to me for the full 2 hours, which is probably a blessing. And some of them are better than me. But we'll begin today. The first slide is just an overview of what we'll be talking about today. Let me go over them briefly with you. We'll talk about a salary increase for all employees of the city, an ADC match, which is the actuarial determined contribution on our legacy pension plan. It has gone up this year, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Personnel additions. Ted Archdeacon will be speaking to the personnel additions that we, as far as part-time and full-time employees, and also Kevin France and Police Chief Jeff Cox will be talking about some additions that are proposed in the new budget for the FY24. There's some surplus 24-23 funding that's included in our current year budget that we'll be asking to spend some of that money for an ambulance. That wording will be included in a resolution for the next Tuesday's board meeting for your consideration. We'll be talking about the Bartlett motor vehicle city fee. It's currently $25. There's a proposal in this year's budget to increase that. We're talking about State Street Aid Fund and how it's going to be configured in the future as far as the revenue coming in, expenditures going out. We're trying to move paving, which has been in our CIP fund for many years, trying to move it to a as-you-go type expenditure included in the State Street Aid Fund, so we don't have to issue debt for that purpose in the future. Solid Waste Fund is a standalone fund. There'll be some equipment purchases that Matt Crenshaw will be talking about as far as what he's proposed for this next year. The other special revenue funds, we'll be talking about those briefly. Water and Sewer Fund, we have some significant challenges in our water and sewer fund in the next few years, especially on the sewer side. John Horn will be talking about that pretty much in detail. General debt service, we'll talk about the revenues coming in and proposed expenditures. Utility service, again, that's service, the fund is under pretty much strained revenue and expenditures because of the increases that the City of Memphis has put on us and proposed increases in expenditures for the sewer rehabilitation and upgrades to our sewer system. Capital improvement program, we're talking a little bit about that. Again, there's no debt for paving included in the capital improvement program. We'll be transferring money out of our utility fund to help pay for sewer improvements, and there will be some proposed debt increase for a streetlight project that we'll be talking about as well. Excuse me. We'll go right into the handout. Again, you have a handout in front of you and also a budget summary book that you can refer to as you need to. Employee salary increase. The mayor is very passionate about treating our employees equally, and the CIP in the last year was 5.9%. CIP for 23 so far is 8.7%, with a 5.8% increase over the last 12 months. For that reason, in order to train and retain competent Staff, the administration is recommending a 5% across the board increase for all city employees. And that in the general fund alone, that amounts to $1.6 million. So that's included in the budget as well. We have some part-time and full-time pay adjustments that we're proposing in the budget, and Ted Archdeacon will come up now at this time to speak to those issues.
Good morning, Aldermen. As Dick said, we did take a look at our part-time minimum, and looking at our local area and doing a wage comparison, we're recommending an increase from $9 minimum to $12 for our part-time employees. Of course, that means an adjustment for all the part-time. The pay tables are all adjusted. So in total, the proposed adjustment would cost approximately $300,000 to make that change to our part-time employees. Several of the part-time pay tables were also adjusted. We took that opportunity to make sure that they were functioning correctly, and now we've reduced it so there's no more than 8 steps on those pay tables. As people have asked, the school crossing guards always comes to light. We're raising the minimum starting salary or pay for those part-time employees from $12 to $15. There are 4 steps, so it goes up to then $15.50, $16, and then $16.50. So just for your information, about 2/3, 16 out of our 25 crossing guards will be at that top level, $16.50 an hour. Going forward, we'd also like to take a close look at our part-time employees each year so that we can keep up and remain competitive. On the next slide, we also wanted to review our full-time minimum, and we'd like to increase that to a minimum of $15. We're actually very close to that now. We only have 3 positions that are less than 15. We have a personal trainer, 1 custodial worker, and 1 general clerk. So that small adjustments for those 3 people, our new minimum for full-time employees will be $15.20, and the cost associated with doing that is less than $2,900. Does anybody have any questions? Thank you.
Did you have a question, Kevin?
I thought David was going to have a question, so I was letting you go first.
I am going to, but Kevin,
Okay. Just real quick. So I think something, I don't know if this may be your question, but when we come to the part-timers, are we going to be able to allow people to work in multiple departments so we can share the part-timers across different departments?
So we have to keep them under 25 to 30 hours so they don't qualify under the Affordable Care Act for our benefits. So we monitor that very carefully. So we target.
We don't have to not allow them to be full-time employees in a way, working at different departments.
So as long as they don't go over the 25 to 30 hours per week.
No, what I'm saying is, what if somebody wants to be a full-time employee, but we don't have a place for them, but we can let them fill 2 part-time positions? Has that just never worked in the past?
We would have to offer them benefits if they're working over the 30 hours.
Okay with offering benefits. I'm just saying, as we have trouble filling some of these positions, have we looked at being creative and allowing that? If somebody wants to work at the rec center and somebody wants to work in public works or something like that, could we do that? Because I know we have trouble filling a lot of the part-time positions.
Well, the only problem with that I see, and maybe it's not a problem, but once you go from 2 part-timers to 1 full-timer, the cost of that employee goes up significantly because of benefits.
No, I understand that, but we have unfilled positions, and I just was asking if that was ever possible.
It is something we could look into. I do think that this increase is going to really help us. Our gym workers currently making $9 an hour are going to make $12 an hour. We're going to have a much better chance of finding our folks.
Okay, I just know that's been a question in the past. Anyway,
sure.
Sorry. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
David?
you need to speak into this so I can hear on YouTube.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. So this may be more of a question. Okay, this could be for probably for Dick, but I'll ask you this. So from an employee viewpoint, what's kind of our lag in terms of, so I know we budget a certain amount for employees for a given fiscal year, yet we only hire so many employees, and so we have some amount of our budget that we never spend because we never get there. So what's that kind of running currently? 5, 10, 15%?
Let me just say this, David, in front of that. In this year's budget, I think across the board, for the first time, when we start this next year's budget, there'll only be, it's either 8 or 9 full-time jobs available right now. We're a full complement in just almost every department for the first time.
Well, there's some attrition and there's things like that happen over the year in which we don't spend the entire budget for employees. So I'm just trying to figure out what that runs typically.
Well, we're pretty much completely employed. We got, what, two vacancies?
2% less.
Oh, 2% less than what we had last year.
Average is about 3 to 4 or 5, depending on the year.
Okay, so we're coming in typically spending 95, 96, 97%. I mean, on a regular fiscal year, I mean, on average.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I know we've had a hard time filling a lot of roles, so has there been a lot of...
That's what we think, but
Yeah.
if we look at the numbers, the percentage is very low.
Very low.
100%.
Okay, cool. That's all I need. Thank you.
And we think it's only improving with bringing these wages up.
Yeah, well, I know a lot of times in budgets, this way at the county, we had a lot of fluff built in the budget and the wages because we had so many unfilled positions, and there were attrition and there were lag times in hiring people. So there tended to be money kind of floating around in some of that. But if you're telling me that doesn't exist because we're so close to 100%, then that's fine.
We're very close to 100%
Okay.
fully employed.
Thank you.
David, y'all been on this a long time. Do we ever get where you're 100%? Mayor, I'm sorry. Mayor, you ever get where it's 100%? Have you had times where you're 100% employed?
We've never been that close.
Okay.
in years
So
past. We've
it's
always
normal, not...
We've always had vacancies and people, attrition and things of
Okay.
that nature.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry, Mayor.
Yes, sir. Anybody else? Who's next? It was Dick, ain't it? So, Dick, you're back up to bat.
Okay. I'm going to speak just briefly on our legacy pension plan. You know, we're required by the state to fully fund the actuarially determined contribution, which is determined by our actuary each year. In FY23, our ADC was $3.4 million, which we're fully funding. And in FY24, it has increased to $4.8 million, which is an increase of 1.3, and that is included in our budget proposal as well. The increase is due to primarily market conditions. At the end of last year, things just kind of tanked for a little bit. And hopefully, as market improves in future years, that number will go down. But for right now, we're required to fund $4.8 million, which is $1.3 million more than last year. Any questions on that?
So if we can just be clear for the public, the reason why this is going up $1.4 million is because the stock market didn't perform
Basically, the stock market.
last year.
Yes, sir.
So we could potentially see as it rebounds next
Of course,
year.
we've had more retirements as well, so pressure both ways.
So both ways, retirements
More retirements,
and poor performance.
more pension outgo, and then the markets.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Any other questions? We'll go now to proposed personnel additions, and first one up is IT Director Kevin France.
Thank you, Board and Mayor Aldermen. Before you is a request for additional personnel for fiscal year 24 for the IT department. Currently, we have 4 staff members in there now. The previous 10 years, the city's grown substantially. We have 26 buildings that have technology in it, all connected with 25 miles of fiber that the city owns. The IT department maintains all that. We've got 2,500 plus devices. That's including cell phones, desktop computers, printers, copiers, anything and everything the police use technology-wise also. We haven't added any additional staff members for the IT department since 2014, even though that we have grown significantly since then for the city technology base. We are requesting to hire a computer support technician starting fiscal year 24 on July 1. Salary is expected to be $43,206, excluding benefits. There is a organizational chart that you can see up there, and we're looking to add a computer support technician to help with basically the help desk side of things. That will help alleviate, actually help with some cross-training duties that we would like to do to assist with personnel in the public safety side. Some of the duties and responsibilities that the help desk person would be responsible for: service calls, PC builds and deployment, cellular phone support. We have 180 plus city users now on cell phones. Printer issues, software upgrades, desk phones. We have 350 plus alone for just desk phones. Adding another 35 copiers just this year, new copiers. The benefits that the position would help us with is, as stated before, the cross-training. It would allow for some additional help over on the public safety side. We are looking at in addition right now, we have a company that we've contracted with, Asylus, for a posture security assessment. They are looking at our current status of how we're protecting ourselves internally. We're waiting for a report to come back from that, and that report may include some cybersecurity improvements, possibly some staffing additions that they may suggest, and some other amplified security measures. We are having a gentleman come on board in June to look at some grants to help possibly cover those types of costs. So, and that's what I'm presenting before you now.
Any questions from the board? Ready to recognize?
Kevin, on the salary at 43, you feel comfortable that you'll be able to hire somebody at 43,000, or in this day and time and that expertise that it had to have, you feel comfortable with that?
For an entry-level person, possibly. We just have to wait and see. Will we get a response back from our applications? We may have to go up, but that's what our current pay tables are set at right now.
And if someone came in at that, is there room for that? Is there a top out on that, or is it just merit, or is there raises on that? How's that work?
Yeah, that particular pay table, the first 3 years has typically a 2 to 3% increase every year. Yeah. And it ranges up to, I guess, about $10,000 to $15,000 in that pay table itself. But there's an additional pay table above that they could move into also.
But if you had somebody apply that was very qualified and all, there's a possibility that pay could be more?
Possibility, yes. Okay.
Yeah, Alderman King, I'll interject just real fast. I know, Alderman Reeves, I want to interrupt you, and I think Ted could elaborate on this if needed, but there is room to grow in that pay scale. So in the event that he had someone come in who had some experience, we obviously could bring them in. That's the starting salary, so that's what we're essentially putting in the budget, but there is some flex in there, obviously, depending on experience.
Alderman Reeves?
Yeah, thank you. So I know a lot of it. So from a salary viewpoint, it's not adequate, to be honest with you. Entry level back in when I went.
That's my question. When I saw that, I said, that's not. Can you get a qualified guy?
He's going to be lucky, and the reason why I say that is because a lot of companies, a lot of folks are really sending baseline computer support to third parties, like bringing in a company that brings in ETW workforce to handle basic break-fix computer support. So I'm wondering, did you look at that? Was that cost prohibitive? Because 43,000. I mean, I'll be honest with you. In 2002, that was an entry level salary in 2002. So I know this might be hard to staff, but I'm just wondering, did you guys look at maybe outside third party to because we use them in the private sector for baseline computer support.
Yeah, we haven't looked outside for doing contract.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to be more of a strategic partner with the city. The IT is more than break fix from our point of view. Yeah. We would like to have the person that all of our staff that come in to actually be a part of the plan, to know what's going on in each department instead of saying, hey, bring a guy in from outside and him not having any knowledge whatsoever with the city.
Yeah.
But yeah, to your point, we probably need to look at those tables.
Yeah.
To see if they're viable anymore.
Yeah.
Or where we need to start.
My recommendation is to come back and bump this salary. I mean, to be honest with you, I think he's going to have a hard time getting a person for this amount, unless they're straight out of high school.
Well, we can, we
Ted, would you
starting
wanna
there, we
interject?
can let him put it out and
Let you take a look at
see
it.
what come
I'm
back.
open to it.
Yeah,
I
I
just
am
don't-
too, because I'm just doing the math on it, and
Right.
and I'm not a tech guy, but I know people that are in that trade that's yeah.
I'll get with personnel and with Ted, and we'll look at the table and see what.
And also, I'd look at the third party just to get a swag to see what the cost would be.
Okay.
We'll look at those, but these are taxpayers' monies, and we want to be prudent, and we'll follow up.
Yeah, but we also don't want to leave positions open like we've been doing. And this type of role is skilled. So,
All duly noted. Anybody else with question?
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin. Mr. Chief Jeff Cox.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning. So I'm here today just to kind of tell you some of the needs that we need in our dispatch area of communications. You see on the PowerPoint, you see what the Director of Public Safety is going to do. The PSAP Director is going to do. But I just want to tell you why we need one. Right now we have been approved by Shelby County 911 to start a new PSAP building. That building will be a state-of-the-art building for 911 and communication. Our groundbreaking will be in a few weeks, which all of you will be invited to as soon as we get that. We should start breaking ground in the next couple, 3 weeks, and that project will be finished sometime around July of 24. So in doing so, we have 21 dispatchers in our dispatch center right now, and each dispatcher runs about 5,700 calls per year. Dispatch is the center of what police and fire do. I can tell you that me and the chiefs, all of us are here in the room today. We can all get in the police car and answer calls. We can all get in the ambulance and make medical calls, and we can get into a fire truck and fight fires. But the one thing none of us can do is go into a dispatch center and answer a call and put out a call on the radio. Right now, that is being ran by the policeman, and we want to turn that over to a PSAP director who is a dispatcher. And so in doing so, this director will not only be able to lead and be able to do the functions that the PSAP needs, but they'll also be able to sit into a console and dispatch calls and be able to answer calls and be able to take some of that. We are hoping in the future to get to 25 dispatchers to be able to handle the calls of service that we have. So what I'm asking is today, and we're just kind of wanting to show you the need for that, and give y'all a kind of an update of what we're expecting a PSAP director to do. We hope to start that process in January of 2024, which will give us 6 months into this budget. We'll be able to 6 months tail end of this budget, and so that's what we're asking for the police department and personnel today, and we believe that it's very important that we allow, or we have a PSAP director in this new building, which is going to be something that the city is going to be very proud of.
Chief, could you, I don't know if you referenced or not, where that building's going to be built at?
Oh, yes, sir. So if you're sitting in our parking lot, in the back side of our parking lot where the police cars are parked, but there's a part of the parking lot between the Sally Port, where we come in and drop prisoners off, and the building where we come into the courts and to the training center. That is going to be positioned in that space. It's going to be 8,500 square feet. That's going to totally redo the parking lot. It's going to have gated access for safety, and it'll be able to. It's really going to improve the whole look of the Justice Center, and so that's where it's going to be located. And you can see it'll have a 50-person training room. It'll have 10 consoles for 10 dispatchers to be dispatching calls at the same time. It'll have everything they need in case there's an emergency or a tragedy happens to be able to stay in that building.
Also, could you address that if we're at 21 dispatchers now, kind of elaborate once the building's built that we'll probably need to hire additional?
Yes, sir. So once the building's built, we will want to try to get to a complement of 25 dispatchers. That PSAP director will be one of those dispatchers, and so in the next couple of years, we would like to get to 25 dispatchers in order to make sure that the citizens have the call volume coming in will be able to be handled by the dispatch.
So that gets, we'll open up for any questions. Alderman Griffin, did you have a question?
One question. You mentioned that it's currently being managed by a police officer, and that I'm sure that officer would rather go back to police work than managing a dispatch center. What will that police officer then be reassigned to once this manager takes over?
Well, the lieutenant is over dispatch right now, and he's doing a great job, by the way. But we will reassign him to another supervisor position inside the department. And so that will take that lieutenant out of that position and put him back into a position inside the police department.
Doing police work?
Yes, sir.
Alderman King?
Chief, this thing is funded not with our budget. This is Shelby County budget. So we're not paying for this building. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's solely off of Shelby County 911 funds, which comes out of our county taxes.
So for the people at home, we're not paying for that. And then will this position most likely be filled within, and then that position would be backfilled for this position? You're going to try to hire within what you already...
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We believe that we have the best dispatchers and people in the city, and we believe that we're going to be able to fill this position inside our side, and it's complement that we already have inside our employees.
And I'm going to piggyback off what you said. Being a fireman, I can fight a fire, but if you ever go into dispatch and watch them, that is a different breed of people that are the dispatch, and they can make life and death difference in how that's handled. So my hat's always off to the dispatchers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chief, do you mind just sharing some of those call volumes too that are around the county, ours compared to some other parts of the county?
Yeah, if you really looked at it, and this is just a rough estimate, our dispatcher handles 5,700 calls per year per dispatcher, 21 dispatchers, and if you look at that, they're actually answering as many calls as a dispatcher in Memphis would do because they have so many dispatchers. And so all this call volume's coming into this call center. Every call that goes into our building goes through dispatch. Every phone call for service, every police call for service, every fire call for service, and every EMS for service. And when we're nobody in any of the suburbs are near what we're doing. And we know that if each dispatcher handling that many calls, it's important to make sure that we have it fully staffed to do so.
Yeah.
Alderman Reeves?
I'm just going to ask a question for every piece. So on the volumes, I kind of asked this of the CAO yesterday. What is the long-term trend of our call volume? Has it been substantial lately, or is it an easy rise over time? Has it been more parabolic? Has it been flat? I'm just real interested in what's driving the need for so many. Well, I mean, obviously their call volume and how many they're handling each, but are we seeing significant increases in calls over time? And do you kind of know what the breakdown or the reason why?
I think that the call volume is staying pretty steady throughout the years. It's the problem I think that we've had is that our dispatch hasn't grown. And so as when I know we had 18 dispatchers just a few years ago. We had 18 dispatchers when I started 30 years ago. And so our call volume it's heavy, but it's staying pretty steady. It's average of about 5,700 calls per year per the last couple of years. The problem is that we're doing it with the same amount of dispatchers we've always done it with.
But when did it get heavy, or has it kind of always been heavy? You've been around a long time. You're a Barley guy, right?
I think as we grew as a city,
yeah.
I mean, you're talking about we went from 47,000 people to 60,000 people. It started to grow. I mean, when we talk about calls of service, we're not talking about crime. We're talking about the need for service. And so it could be, anything from I just need somebody to come by my house. It could be for welfare checks. It could be anything. And because we are a city that answers all these calls and we put all these calls out no matter what it is, we're going to come. You're going to get the service that you want. Then our call volumes are going to be up.
So the value of this role to the citizens, one is do we expect better call response times, or is it we're just adding a supervisor to really help make sure that, those employees are...
I think my goal for this person is going to be several things. One, it's going to keep training. Number one key is to make sure that we are up on our training.
Yeah.
Two, it's going to make sure that we're running an efficient. We do QAs, which means that we look at every call to make sure that we're asking the right questions and giving the right service to the department. And three, I think it's going to be something that they're going to have a dispatcher leading them, and they've never had that. Mm-hmm. And they're going to be able to know what they need, and they're going to know what the city needs to be able to make sure it's successful. And that's, I think, the most important part of that is that I know what a policeman needs, but I don't know what a fireman needs. And so this dispatcher, whoever we get to hire in, is going to know what the dispatchers need, and they're going to know how to bring it to the next level where I wouldn't be able, where a policeman wouldn't be able to. And so I think that's the biggest thing I see out of it is going to be the training, the service, and just the amount of the amount of training that they need to do that. So
I can buy that. Thank you.
Alderman Quinn?
Just a quick question. So is the money we're getting for this building, is it going to include some replacement parking for the areas that we're losing back there?
So we're not really losing any parking. We're not, so because of the way they're going to redesign the parking lot, I think we may, I can't remember, if maybe we lose 4 parking spots.
Wow, that's incredible. Okay.
And so, and in doing so, because of the way they're positioning the building and redoing the parking lot and the gates, we'll lose 4.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Chief.
Alderman Griffin?
As I understand it, Bartlett was chosen first over the other suburbs for this facility, and it will be used as the template for the other suburbs as this expands, correct?
That's right. This is going to be a model of the Memphis 911 Center. We will be the first suburb to have one, and was approved by 911 to do that. It's approximately about a $12-14 million project.
Great.
So,
thank you.
Question.
Alderman Simmons?
How many people do you have working in the answering calls, telling so and so? You got one or two people?
Yeah. So right now we have a total of 21 dispatchers, and we have 3 working at each time. And so we have 3 dispatchers right now working at each console every shift, 24/7, and doing so right now.
Is that enough?
No, sir. We're trying to get to where we're running 4 consoles a shift, and that would give us more coverage, and that would give us more supervision in order to make sure that those done. So right now we're only running 3.
We're going to make you a hero.
Thank you, sir.
Alderman Quinn, did you have a question? Okay. Any more questions for the chief? All right. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Phoebus?
Thank you, Chief, for that presentation. The next part is talking about the transfers out. If you'll look on page 2 of the general fund summary, at the bottom third of the page, you'll note that we do have some transfers out from the general fund to other funds for specific purposes. I'll briefly go over these transfers. When the school system was created in 2014, the city was required, based on state law, to provide an equivalent of 15 cents on a property tax rate to help fund the schools. At the time, that amounted to $1.737 million. And we have been providing that to the school system each year since it was created. There's no requirement that this be increased. It can be decreased under certain circumstances, but we've never gone in that direction. So the funding remains at $1.73 million for this FY24. The other transfer out to this is really to the Shelby County Board of Education. We transfer it to the schools, and they pay the Board of Education. As you remember, there was a lawsuit involving the City of Memphis, Shelby County Commission, Shelby County Board of Education, and City of Bartlett, and City of Bartlett Board of Education. All those entities were involved in a lawsuit back when the schools were formed. There was an agreement to compromise and settle that lawsuit at the time. It became effective on 1/16/2014. Part of the agreement provided that the Bartlett Board of Education would pay Shelby County Board of Education $608,193 per calendar year for 12 years, and that's provided in the Section 7 of the agreement that we signed to create the Bartlett City Schools. We're currently in year 10, as far as FY24 will be year 10. So after that will be 2 more payments that we're required, or the schools are required to pay the Shelby County Board of Education for that purpose. Other transfers in the budget document include transfers to the Debt Drug Enforcement Fund for the DARE program, $33,000 for this program for that purpose. Transfer to the Drainage Fund. We currently transfer $100,000 each year to the Drainage Fund. And if you look on one of the pages as far as the Drainage Fund in the budget, on page 12, you'll note that we've been spending fund balance in that for the last several years and continue to do that in 2024. Fund balance right now after the 2024 will be $74,000. So there's a need to provide revenue sources for that fund. I know we've always heard that Drainage Fund, City of Bartlett is the only city in the county that does not have a drainage fee to support their drainage fund. We support it using general fund transfers to that fund. So that may be a consideration in the future to help ease the revenue and expenditure situation in the drainage fund. Transfer the debt service. We've been transferring $3.55 million to debt service for the last several years, and this is basically to help fund the school debt, which was $42 million, if you remember, back several years ago that we borrowed in order to build the Bartlett High School, and other debt that was issued during the year. So we've transferred $3.55 million to the debt service fund for that purpose to help retire principal and interest. General Improvement Fund, we transferred the last couple of years $275,000, and I'll refer you to page 8 of the budget summary. It shows we're spending $209,000 of fund balance projected in 2024, leaving us with a fund balance of $222,000. Expenditures have continued to go up in that fund for computers, maintenance agreements with software companies, and it will likely continue to go up in future years because of technology advancements and the desire to maintain current technology for the city of Bartlett. So that's another area that future boards may have to look at as far as how do we fund the General Improvement Fund. We also have a transfer to the Bartlett Station Commission. It's been $80,000 the last few years. This is the Station Commission meets monthly to promote small business in that area, in the Bartlett Station area, provide incentive payments for leasing space, facade improvements, and support Bartlett Chamber personnel at farmers market and other events that the Chamber puts on. Do you have any questions in regard to those transfers? If not, we'll...
Alderman Young?
I'd like to just make one comment that in case people didn't understand what the $608,000, that's actually the purchasing of our schools. We're paying off what Shelby County School Board or Shelby County Schools formerly owned, and when we started our system, we had to pay them, and that's what that covers.
Yeah, like 6 cents on the dollar. It was a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
It was 11 buildings.
They actually, the agreement actually states they do give us those buildings, all those school buildings that were formerly Shelby County and now belong to Bartlett City Schools. But the payments was designated for retirement obligations for the employees at the time, and that's what the $608,000 is for over a period of 12 years.
It was for the liability for those who transfer.
Did you have any comments, Alderman Reeves, other than that?
Yeah, no other ones. The interesting part, $608,000 is going to free up in the next 2 years, really, so we can see that on the horizon coming back to the general fund, so we can use that to shore up some stuff. But that deal was a good deal for us to get the school system started for $7.3 million over 12 years. I mean, it was a great.
I think our proposal, subject to approval by the board, would be to use that for debt service to help retire bonds and notes in the debt service fund. Any other questions on those transfers?
When that time comes.
Eric?
Was there any more questions for on this subject here? All right. Moving to...
We go to...
Chief Tommy.
We do have some surplus funding in the general fund for the current year, FY23, and we plan on using some of that funding for purchase of an ambulance. And at this time, I ask Tommy Gately to come forward to discuss the ambulance.
Thank you, Dick. Good morning, Mayor and Board. To kind of echo some of the things that Chief Cox said, the building that's being constructed for dispatch will also be the primary emergency operations center for the city, where our team will gather in the event of a disaster. I want to speak briefly on the ambulance request. Essentially, it's just a request to purchase something early and to secure a stake, a placeholder that our dealer put in place when they realized or they were notified of an 18 to 24 month delay in materials, pretty much everything we've seen with the truck request last year, extended wait times. COVID kind of changed everything as far as how long it takes us to get our equipment. When we were notified of that, the company who secured the last 5 ambulances through sealed bid through the city decided that they would go ahead and put a placeholder in there with no obligation to the city. And so what this would allow us to do is to get our name on it and get it 6 to 8 months earlier. The slides are pretty simple. EEP is the company who's produced that out of Horn Lake, Mississippi. If you go to the next slide, Eric, that's kind of just some general data of our ambulances. We have 8 ambulances in our fleet, 5 frontline ambulances, 3 reserves. They stay in that fleet for about 16 years. Every 2 years we ask for an ambulance. And if you look over to the right, you'll see some numbers there, the years of those ambulances. And traditionally every 2 years we've purchased ambulances. The way it kind of fluctuates a little bit based on when they're secured and when they're actually delivered. So those are the year dates of those ambulances. But our call volume is increasing. That's kind of The going trend in EMS is that we're kind of a catch-all for even fallen parties now, where neighbors used to help more. Now the fire service is being utilized even more frequently for routine calls. Our ambulances average about 12 to 15,000 calls per year. About 65 to 70% of our transports stay within St. Francis Bartlett, Methodist North, so we're really not traveling the interstates as much as you would think. But in the event that we do go to somewhere downtown or Germantown, Methodist Germantown or the Med, for example, that's where they're starting to accrue more and more mileage. So our replacement cycle is every 2 years, and so that's pretty much the overview of while we're trying to secure an ambulance. There is an asterisk up there on one of our ambulances. We had a rough year last year, 2 accidents which were no fault of the city. One of the ambulances out of service for probably another several months until the repairs can be made to the body. There's only one body shop that can do the work and keep the ambulance under warranty, so we'd like to keep that there. Are there any questions?
I just make this comment that that we're putting on the agenda for Tuesday night a resolution to $268,000 to use unused fund balance of this year's budget for that. So you will see that on the agenda for Tuesday night. Alderman Quinn, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to see if you had an updated ETA on the new fire truck.
We're looking at next fall. We're guessing September to October. We're still asking for a hard date, but they're having hard times with loose equipment. So it's the fire truck itself and then getting all the equipment for it as well. But once it starts the assembly line, the manufacturer starts a process where we can start to view it online, and we haven't seen that started yet. So we're hopeful for next fall.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Alderman Griffin?
With that new truck, who are you purchasing? Is that one of the E1 trucks? Because I know that they've had difficulties with that when we saw it at the shop recently.
Fire truck or ambulance?
Truck, the fire truck.
The truck that's purchased is an E1.
Okay.
Ocala, Florida.
Only because we heard complaints at the shop, the maintenance shop, about how difficult those are to repair, and they seem to break down a lot.
Tommy, you want to refer will you refer to how old that unit is that it's replacing?
The unit can be replaced is going to be Unit 8, if you could go back. Unit 4 is a 2016, will go into the reserves, and then you'll see that the 2007 will go out of service. E1 has been someone who has won the bids for many, many years. It's been a sealed bid process, and anywhere from, I would say, 10 to 15% less expensive than competitors. And a lot of our issues have been unfortunate because they haven't necessarily been manufacturer issues as much as they have been engine and transmission. So we face some challenges. Yes, there's some different brands, but through our bid process, we do have the ability to do lowest and best bid. And so we would always entertain looking at those options.
Chief, I think he was talking about the fire truck. How old was the age of the fire truck that it's replacing?
It's going to be 20 years old.
20 years. Alderman Reeves.
So, how many current trucks are we using that are reserve trucks versus our primary?
So 5 primary, 3 reserves, and then one of those reserves is actually being utilized by Unit 4 right now until it gets repaired.
Okay.
At any given time, our units may either need some type of repair or preventative maintenance, so it will be in the shop, and so that reserve number drops. The reason Unit 8 has lower mileage than the others is because it has an intermittent electrical issue, and therefore it's less reliable, and so it sees the shop more frequently. Also, we do have 8 ambulances, and so when the calls exceed the number of resources available, the EMS supervisor, the men and women on the fire truck, EMTs, paramedics, will put additional ambulances in service. It really takes no time to deplete your ambulances when you think about an MVC with 3 people in each vehicle. We can take more than 1 per ambulance, but it takes nothing to deplete that. But yes, we have 3 spares is what we would consider.
Do you feel good about the spares? And it's not a trick question, Tommy. It's just we've seen things happen with people driving reserve trucks in other adjacent cities.
Definitely.
And I just want to make sure safety-wise.
They're not as reliable as we'd like, But the trend has been the every 2-year purchase. One of the things that we've seen is they're less reliable. They do spend more time in the shop. That's why they essentially are moved over. So no, they do pass an annual inspection. These are certified mechanics that look at them. The state also regulates the requirements for them based on age, mileage. Some cities even go by hours. But our replacement cycle is longer than any other city I've referenced.
Okay. Anything we can do to help that? Past what we're already doing? Because to me, safety, and I know we all take safety very seriously.
And it's something that we probably about 5 years ago when we swapped manufacturers, when you see the two 2016s up there, someone secured one of the bids that was unable to produce. We swapped companies, and they actually produce a higher quality box that may produce the opportunity for a remounts. That the safety features are there. It's an all aluminum box. There's no wood in it. So it may produce the ability to save anywhere from probably 15 to 20%, maybe even 30, depending on where we're at with the supply chain. But there is hope that one day that we can shorten that gap a little bit to make sure that we're in better equipment.
Okay. Thank you.
Alderman King?
One thing people don't realize, sometimes every call they make, they don't transport. They make a lot of calls in the unit, and then they don't end up
6,200 medical calls last year. We transported 3,700.
How many?
3,700.
Out of how many?
6,200.
Okay.
And that's not including fire calls. That's just medical calls where we assisted and didn't transport.
And Tommy, are those reserve units fully equipped?
They're ready. Chief Webster and
I mean, few items, the drugs and a few items.
No, they're all ready to go with cardiac monitors, cardiac drugs.
So fire truck can go by and get that and get on it and go. Okay.
Yeah, we do paramedic intercept as well, where someone can grab the ambulance and meet them on scene.
Yeah.
And another company can respond. So
right.
We have those.
That's good that they're staffed, because a lot of people don't take some 3 or 4 hours to change over and all that.
They're ready to go.
Yeah.
Computers and all.
It's, being one of the first suburban cities to do an ambulance program, it's taken us a while just to get an ambulance in all 5 stations. And we only was able to get to an ambulance in Station 5 just...
In 2018, Station 2 was the one that y'all added that allowed 1 ambulance per station, frontline.
Mm-hmm. So, very proud of that fact. Is there any other questions for Chief Gately?
Let me follow up on Chief Cox talked about the new building and the PSAP. Was it director or manager? It was whoever's going to be over that. Increased efficiency is what I believe that we'll see as a result of that. And going through our ISO processes and the many different things, dispatch is just a critical part. I do believe that ambulances, fire trucks, and police officers will be dispatched even quicker as a result of the increased technology from the building, and then likelihood of just the nature of having somebody with oversight specifically to dispatchers.
Just FYI for the new guys, our EOC now is currently in what some would call the large boardroom across the hall, and I'm very excited about being able to move that to a state-of-the-art facility over there. So, is there any questions from anybody else? Thank you, Chief Gately.
Thank you.
At this time, let me just say this: we're approaching an hour. Is everybody good? Do we need to take a break, or you keep moving forward? Is that a keep moving forward? Yeah. Okay, good. Dick, you ready to call Christie up?
Yes. There's a proposal in the budget to change the motor vehicle city fee to bring in additional revenue, and Christy Francabella is the finance director to speak to that.
Good morning. Our next item is the Bartlett Motor Vehicle City Fee. This item, as you can see, has to do with motor vehicle registration renewals and new registrations that are done through Shelby County Clerk's office and then remitted to us. Currently, our fee is at $25. And it has been at $25 since February 2008. So we have not increased that in 15 years. We do propose in this budget that we do increase that by $10. And that puts us more in line with our contemporaries in Germantown and Collierville. As you can see right now, we are the lowest out of that group.
Ms. Christie, would you want to kind of give an explanation too about when people purchase their tags, the way those fees are broke down and the total cost of when you actually purchase a tag and the makeup of how you get to $106 or $117?
Yes, sir. When you register a new vehicle through Shelby County Clerk's Office, Shelby County charges the registration fee, the title fee, and then the wheel tax. Layered in with that is the city fees. So Bartlett's is $25 right now. We're proposing we increase that to the $35. And then renewals, the same except minus the title fee.
So in short,
Yearly fee.
this is not an increase in a wheel tax, which we have nothing to do with. This is an increase in the city motor vehicle fee.
Yes, registration, title, wheel tax, all are levied by Shelby County and stay with Shelby County.
So, just so we're clear that this part, there's any, any questions for Christie from the board? Alderman Reeves?
If we can dig into this just for a second, because I know while it's not technically the wheel tax, it comes out with the wheel tax. It's a very unpopular tax. I mean, it just is. Because originally I believe the wheel tax was put in place to fund specifics around education, if I'm not mistaken. And it was meant to be temporary, and then it was meant to go away. So I guess my question is, obviously we want to stay as flat as we can, kind of across the board. This is going to generate $470,000. If this doesn't get approved, what's getting cut out of the budget? And I'm not saying I'm not going to vote for it, I'm going to vote for it, but this is a heavy lift. I believe it's almost even harder than property tax, to be honest with you, because this is such an unpopular tax. So what is your thought? If we don't approve this, what does it do? What are we going to cut out of the budget? So
We would, we could pull, yeah, you can, Steve.
So I'll elaborate just a little bit. There's a couple of slides that are going to come up, so not to put the cart before the horse, but there is a plan here. So, and once we go forward here, I think John's going to come up, we'll talk about some paving. The plan here is to get away from something we've been doing that Mr. Phoebus will elaborate on and apply that additional $470,000 to avoid going out to debt on something we previously been purchasing with that.
Yeah. I'll just make a recommendation when we have how we're going to fund things. Let's go through the ask first and then bookend this at the end. That way we understand exactly what it's going for. I think it'd just be easier. But I say that this is not, I mean, you and I talked about this, right? I mean, this is not really a very popular tax. So,
So let's circle back to it. All right, so right now we're basically going through the budget and we're going through it as you'd see it in that pamphlet that you have, right? So we're just going stage by stage. So we got a couple other slides that are going to come up. When we get there, we'll circle back, kind of explain how it's all going to fall in.
Okay, that sounds good to me. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Only comment I'd make, Alderman Reeves, is I agree with you. Wheel tax is the most unpopular thing that's ever happened in Shelby County, but this isn't part of the wheel tax. And we need to make sure citizens understand we don't have anything to do with the wheel tax, but we do have the opportunity to do as the other cities do and increase the fees that unfortunately are attached to that.
Yeah, if there wasn't a wheel tax, we wouldn't be charging a fee. So to me,
I'm not sure that's true.
Would we not?
1970.
Did we charge this fee before we had the wheel tax?
No, probably not.
So and that's okay. We can talk more about it. But you understand, Mayor, this is an unpopular tax, and I think that we're just going to have to deal with that. Or we're going to have to talk about where are we losing money right now in the city, or what services are we providing that we're underwater that's requiring us to do some of this.
I think it's a good conversation that we will have.
Yeah.
Let's give Mr. Phoebus the opportunity to tell you what the administration's plan is with this $10. Mr. Phoebus.
If you look on page 4 of the budget summary, at the very top of the page, where we have the vehicle registration city fee, you've been collecting about $1.2 million a year from that fee. And the proposal is to increase it. The $10 will bring in an additional roughly $470,000. So for 2024, the vehicle registration fee will be $1.7 million. Now, after the first year, we propose to transfer that money to, I believe, the State Street Aid Fund for use for paving. And we want to do that to get away from having to borrow money every year for paving projects, which obviously includes interest on the debt. And I mentioned earlier, interest on a debt from paving over the years is about $12 million. So if we can eliminate the interest just on the paving projects that we have, that's $12 million to the good that we can apply toward pay-as-you-go type funding for paving projects. And that was the intent proposal that we're trying to do here, increasing the auto registration fee by $10. You see, we're not really out of line with other cities in the county. Collierville and Germantown already charge $25. Millington 30, Memphis 30, present time.
Yeah.
So we're not really out of line with what other cities are doing, and from our perspective, we can use that to eliminate debt, a lot of interest on the debt that will go toward paving city streets on an annual basis, and that's thinking behind increasing that.
So, if I could, Mr. Mayor, fantastic explanation. So, right now we're issuing debt to pay, but primarily because the gas tax collections that the state's taking in over time is not.
Gas tax collections are kind of stagnant.
They're stagnant, right?
The gas tax is based on the amount of gas imported into Tennessee, not purchased at the tank. So, you know, in a period of people not traveling,
right,
down economy, whatever, gas tax revenue decreases on an annual basis.
Hey, Dick, this may help Alderman Reeves. So traditionally, this slide here tells us the debt we've been issuing to pave our streets with, that we're trying to stop being so dependent on issuing bonds to pay for this, and try to get a recurring revenue source in here that we don't have to go to bonds. Dick, if you want to elaborate on this slide right here and what's been paid and how we've been paying for street paving.
FY 2012, you can see we've borrowed over $23 million to issue for paving of streets in the city. And you know, that's pretty much the annual paving budget for the city. But in addition to the debt issued, once we pay it back, we also pay $12.3 million, or almost $12.4 million in interest. So we're trying to get away from doing that. You know, you can't borrow your way into prosperity sometimes, but cities always have a need to borrow money for projects. But we're trying to eliminate that and do a pay-as-you-go type activity in our State Street Aid Fund to supplement the gas tax, to allow us to use those taxes to pay for paving. And you can think of the registration fee on an automobile. People use the automobile. They travel on our city streets all the time. So that's really for the benefit of every citizen that uses a vehicle to travel on our city streets to help us with the paving projects so we don't have potholes. And You can think of it that way. And I know people say wheel tax. You're right. It's unpopular. They don't like it. But I don't know how we get people to change their way of thinking. This is not a wheel tax. It's a registration fee, which other cities have, just like Bartlett. And it will be used for a good purpose, paving streets.
So guys, just a second, because I know you're kind of getting confused because we pulled this slide up and it's not next in line, and we can come back and visit that. But in short, you can see that we've been spending anywhere from $2.5 to $3.5 million a year through the years there, the past several years. And so let us, before we talk any more about that, Dick, because we'll take more questions on that once John, we can come back to this slide once John gets through. So let's let John come forward right now, if you would.
All right.
And we'll be back right on your slides, which is the slide next behind the gas tax overview. And John wanted an hour and a half. We trimmed him back to 5 minutes.
It's an hour and 20 minutes, I think. Good morning, Mayor and Board. Thank you for the opportunity to serve. And I think the next slide that I've got before you is our proposed citywide paving plan for beginning July 1st. We've got 4 different areas on there. I think the second slide is, as you kind of zoomed in, so those areas include Area 1, which is East Briar. That's on kind of off of Yale Road between Elmore Park and Alturia. Area 2 is Shira Drive, which is off of Old Brownsville Road and Galen Ridge subdivision. Area 3 is over near Yale Road and Old Brownsville Road, Craigmont Drive, Peyton Randolph, that subdivision over there. And Area 4 is Rocky Ford Drive, which has been rough shaped for a number of years because we extended a 16-inch water main through there a number of years ago. And so historically, Public Works and Engineering, we've kept a list of all the city streets and I'm going to say the pavement condition, I'm going to use that phrase, pavement condition, of our streets. And every year what we do is we go and we drive the city. We have 2 staff guys that drive the city. Now we have about 300 center line miles in Bartlett, so that's very time consuming. And they do just a visual assessment with their eyes. These guys have really good trained eyes. In assessing the streets, we get input, as we always have, from our Public Works Department, and of course final direction from our mayor as far as which streets come next, with one goal, and that is obviously that our worst streets get paved next. And so these are the streets that we're proposing in the FY24 budget beginning July to get those streets repaired and paved. Of course, we also get citizens' input as well on these streets. Also, in addition to that, on slide 3, we also have what I would call some of our long-term projects. And so these projects, I know this is a very busy map, but let me give you just a brief explanation. For the last number of years, we have been applying for federal dollars for paving of streets and road construction. And so federal paving goes through TDOT and our local MPO. And so that's called the TIP plan. And so that's a transportation infrastructure plan. And so all of the colors and all these colors represent projects which represent about $34 million in federal money and about $8 million in city of Bartlett. So all these projects are funded 80% by TDOT and 20% by our local match. The yellow stripes or the yellow roads that you see on there are roads that we have planned on paving over the next 5 years using 80% federal funding. Now you may notice on there Brother and Yale is in yellow, and we're almost complete with that. So that was a $4 million project where our local match was only $800,000 to do that project. There's other yellow roads on there, which would be over the next 5 years for repair, milling, and paving that are all 80% federal funds. You're going to see a green line on there, and that is the Fletcher Creek Phase 4 Greenway Trail. So that's all also on there. The red line for Old Brownsville Road, that's almost completed. Fall of this year, spring of next, Old Brownsville Road will be completed. And just in conclusion, you're going to see a lot of blue and red dots. So those are again, 80% federally funded handicap ramps that we are required by ADA to replace. And so those are on the current plan. Just keep in mind that all these projects, when we do a TDOT project, give you an example, Brother Yale, that's about to be completed. We initiated that proposal in 2017. So that's taken 6 years of patience, endurance to get that project from the very beginning to where it gets paved. So moving on to the final slide, I mentioned pavement condition. That's something we all have an opinion on. And we do this every year, like I mentioned. I'm kind of repeating myself to where we go out, we update our inventory lists, pavement condition of all of our streets by 2 of our staff people, getting input from Public Works and direction from our mayor. There is another, technology is offering an additional guide for us. And so we're going to be in the process of putting out an RFQ for pavement management proposal. And so there's a number of companies in this area that will go out, they will drive every lane of our city, and what they do is they scan in all of our roads. And as they're scanning, this is a high-speed video, but what they do is they bring this into a program, and it basically scans in every single crack, the crack depth with it, which is important, in the pavement age and condition. And they do a full mapping system for us for the city that gives us a pavement condition index. It rates the whole city and the streets, and then also gives us some additional battle plans or some additional proposals for how to repair that in what years in the time to come. So we feel like this is not going to replace us driving the streets. We'll still do this, but we feel like this gives us an unbiased and a little bit more in-depth information on our pavement condition.
So that, in essence, you can see that the budget has $2 million worth of paving that was on one of those other screens back there, and we're fixing to go out and put an RFQ for what John had just said, and so we're kind of, this year we're proposing a $2 million repaving under the places that John just pointed out. And by this time next year, we'll have this evaluation, and then we can do some long-term planning and have something that I really like. It's not biased. It's got yeah. So then we can kind of make sure that what we thought was priorities, that if they see something we didn't see, so that going forward we can have a better plan of what we need to do and how we need to address it and what the priorities need to be. So while I have John there, because I think the next slide was Dick that we were, oh, you taking over the rest? Okay. So while we have the city engineer up there, is there any questions from the board? Alderman Griffin?
One question. You mentioned that company that's doing the street scans. How often will they be scanning? You mentioned it's a 3-year maintenance report, so are they scanning it every 3 years, or is it annually, as the roads may change since the last scan?
What we'll do, once we select a consultant, within about the first 4 or 5 months, they will go ahead and scan the entire city. Mm-hmm. And then they'll basically create a dashboard. We'll have some meetings with them, opportunity to ask questions, and then they'll provide that information to us on a dashboard to where we can look at the city. You can click on any single street, and it'll give you the pavement condition and a recommended repair plan for that. And we'll have that at our access for 3 years. It is a 3-year contract where we have access to that information. And at the end of 3 years, they want you to update that contract with an additional fee, and then they go back and rescan other streets.
Okay, so they just scan the once for a 3-year period then?
Yes.
Thanks.
And the scan actually Alderman Griffin, is it's that condition, they grade it from a 0 to 100, 0 being a failure, 100 being perfect. And so that kind of gives, we had a similar grading system as 1 to 5, but this gives a little more in-depth perspective on that. Kevin, I'm sorry, Alderman Quinn.
Okay, so not to put you on the spot, but Old Brownsville. So
When is it going to be finished?
Yes, when's it going to be finished? And we need the exact date and time. Sorry.
It's the contractor's anticipating by the fall. I think that's very aggressive. And so when you ask, when I get asked that question, I always tend to think worst case scenario. I think more in terms of spring. Because construction projects always end much later than you always think they will.
Well, I mean, I know there's been a lot of surprises out there, lift stations and stuff like that. But the second thing, and I know we've discussed this before over the way it worked in the past with this wish list and waiting for TDOT funds and stuff. But I don't know how much longer Elmore and Elmore Park can wait before it just disintegrates. I mean, I don't know if y'all, but it is really bad. And it's no fault of engineering, but I'm just saying, how long can we wait for something like that deterioration? Because the longer it goes, the less it becomes just a milling and repaving project, and we may have to have some bed construction and stuff like that. And Elmore Park is just a mess anyway. It's about that thick, and it's just.
Kevin, that's a good question. I mean, really, if we stick to the plan that I showed you, in Brunswick Road, Elmore, and Elmore Park are bundled into one project. And that's going to be, it's going to be at least 5 years on that plan if we stick to that plan. And you're right, I think it's one of those things that we may have to we continue to reassess it and look at it.
Thank you.
Alderman Young?
I'm assuming this company you're going to hire that's going to do this analysis will point out that those are the worst streets or whatever, and should be a lot less are more objective in telling us what we need to do and where we need to do. But we also understand there are winters we go through that do a lot more damage than other times, and you can't anticipate that either. So we can get the best advice in the world, we still going to have to use our heads to figure out what we need to do.
I agree, and nothing replaces that. Nothing replaces, in my opinion, our two guys that go out that know the streets, they know the pavement condition, they know how to repair it, and getting their eyes on those roads, nothing beats that.
Okay.
And so I think this is a good 1-2 punch for us, being able to do both of them.
Okay, thanks.
Any more questions for City Engineer? Thank you, John.
So I'm going to try to bring all this together. So John had pointed out that we're looking at a 3-year paving project. The reason being is so we can develop a strategic plan to address paving specifically. Mr. Phoebus had already touched on the bonds. I brought that screen back up just to reiterate what I think we would all agree is something we cannot continue to do. So the goal here is to basically try to find alternative means. One of those means is what Ms. Francavella just mentioned, which was a $10 increase in our motor vehicle fees to produce essentially $470,000 that will help towards paving. But there's some other things that need to be done too. The first of which I'll address, our previous administration had already pursued this in regards to an LED conversion. So you are all aware of this. PATH was contracted, and essentially they came in and gave us an assessment to figure out exactly how much it would cost for us to change out all of our street light fixtures to LED, and in turn helping us save money, make our streets brighter, etc. So we have everything back, and I want to talk about that because there's a twofold approach to that. Not only does it save us money in street light maintenance, but obviously you get a brighter and better street. So PATH presented a proposal, which we'll break down in just a second. And we also got a proposal from MLG&W. And in order to pursue this, we'll have to write a new agreement with MLG&W. Okay, so they obviously made an offer as well. No matter what we end up doing, if we go back one slide, Eric, we're going to be required to pay MLG&W $250, or basically $1.2 million, essentially, to replace the asset, which is essentially that LED fixture that we'll be replacing. It's a TVA requirement. It's not really anything we can get around at this point. within the budget that you have, assuming that everyone is good moving forward with the LED possibility here, we would essentially transfer $2.5 million out of debt services to help cover this project, and the remainder would be done through bonds. So as I mentioned before, we met with MLG&W. If you go one slide, Eric, we met with MLG&W, we met with PATH, and I put their proposals, if you'll look to the left where it says cost comparison, depending on where you're sitting. So I'll start where it says pole wirings and equipment, okay? So this is a cost that's not going to change. This is essentially the pole itself, the wires that go in it, the equipment that is there. So that's $7.5 million doesn't change. That's an asset that is there. As you move down a little bit where we talk about the fixtures themselves, the LED installed cost is going to be a little different. You'll notice that MLG&W is cheaper in that regard. That next line talks about a light management system, so I'll explain that briefly. Essentially what that means is once we make this conversion, if, for instance, a light goes out, and I know we've all heard those complaints, a light goes out, we could build into this contract that I'll use an arbitrary date that we're going to say 30 days. And MLG&W agrees that they're going to have that little light replaced in 30 days. We'd all see it, we'd all know it. It's a system that we could all go into. We'd know exactly when the light went out, exactly when the light went repaired. We'd actually have something to go back to MLG&W and ask about. And I'll mention that they've been great. During conversations, we've had no issues with MLG&W at all. But you'll notice MLG&W is going to include that LMS system, whereas they're going to charge PATH essentially for us to be able to use it. All right. So there's a grant that obviously would apply. Part of that grant you'll see is a little bit cheaper with MLG&W just because of some fees that they take out. But when it comes down to the LED net cost, again, that cost savings even becomes more significant in the favor of MLG&W. However, if you come down just a little bit, this is where things differ. So for one, once those depreciated assets, essentially those LED fixtures go in place, MLG&W would require us to pay 10.41% maintenance on that depreciated asset. So which essentially means that we would be paying $437,000 annually in order to keep those lights to maintain them. The PATH model obviously doesn't include that. We would pay that up front. You'll also notice the annual energy costs are different, and I'll explain that just a little bit. So as PATH is installing these, MLG&W would allow them to basically distort them however we wanted. So for instance, in neighborhoods, if we wanted to reduce the dim a little bit where it wasn't so bright, we would have the ability to do that. We'd have the autonomy to make those adjustments. Essentially, MLG&W at this time, and I stress the word at this time, would basically just install them as is, and that's what you're going to get. So the reason for that difference, essentially, is because of the lack of adjustment, right, which we may be able to negotiate. But if you come all the way down, after we're doing both projects, PATH essentially would produce us a cost savings of about $242,000 a year, and that's taking into consideration the debt service that would be associated with it. So we're putting that number in there. It'd be basically $38,000 in savings if we went with the MLG&W option. I will mention, however, that as we're going through with MLG&W and still trying to redo this contract, this is not a final presentation of what this would be, okay? What it is a final presentation for is what this budget includes, which is the funding that would be needed to support it. So we would, no matter what, plan to use the general fund surplus of 125 to essentially address that depreciated asset for the fixtures themselves. And then we would take, or propose to take, 2.5 out of debt services. If we go the PATH route, depending on how this works out, you'd be looking at maximum a $3.6 million GO bond in order to cover the cost. We laid this out to kind of give you an idea over the terms of that loan for essentially 20 years what the overall cost savings would be comparing MLG&W to PATH. And I think you can see there's a very large discrepancy between the cost savings would be associated with PATH as it stands and with MLG&W. Again, like I mentioned before, we're still trying to work out the particulars, but I wanted to be able to, as of right now, the budget that you have in front of you that you're reviewing, assuming that everybody is comfortable moving forward with it, the LED conversion doesn't change. You know what I mean? The pay for the depreciation doesn't change, and the pay for the transfer doesn't change, okay? So we'll go one more slide, and this is where we'll kind of get down a little bit. So Mr. Phoebus had talked about our street aid fund, and that's essentially where street light maintenance is paid out of, okay? Eric, could you pull up that street aid fund just so we can kind of have it to reference? So I want you to look at the FY23 request projection first, and notice how this is really a suffering account, right? So we got to do something to replace it. So when we go to the FY24 request, essentially the reason that we're having to go out to bonds right now is because we're not able to use the gas tax to support paving. Reason being is because we're paying so much in street lighting. So what we're proposing to do here, so essentially adding $10 to our motor vehicle fee in order to produce an additional $470,000 to help with paving. The additional ask would be to go with LED lights to make them more energy efficient. In this account, and the reason I say this account is because after this year's a little different because, take into account that you got to change over. They're changing things out. It's not like it's going to be done July 1st. You know what I mean? It's a project that might take a minute. But once it's all said and done, there's going to be a significant cost savings that comes with this, upwards of $400,000 to $500,000 that we're currently saving. So the LED conversion saves an additional amount of money in this account. And then we would propose to issue a $5 streetlight fee to address basically this streetlight upgrade that we're proposing to do with the LEDs, which pretty much frees up the remainder of the gas tax, which at this point is $2.1 million, included with that transfer that Mr. Phoebus had previously mentioned of $470,000. And now we have at least $2.6 every year to put towards paving. Now, that's out of this account. And so I think a lot of that depends on what happens with this 3-year assessment that we're doing. And that's when we come back to you. And we say, okay, this is what the 3-year assessment shows. This is what our roads look like. This is what their suggested maintenance is. This is how much money we were able to generate in this specific account. And how do we want to fund it to repair the roads that we all travel on? And this is our start to get this fund back in order, to get the street aid fund right, and to start moving in the right direction to avoid having to take out bonds to continue to pave roads.
Dick, you have anything you want to add?
I was just going to say on the streetlight project, we contracted with PATH to do the initial survey and the explanation of what it would cost. In that contract, if we do not use them for this purpose, then we have to pay them $100,000, and that was in the agreement itself. So that's not figured in these numbers, but it's just something you need to remember. That if we don't use them, we have to pay them $100,000 for their efforts. If we do use them, then that's absorbed in the fees that they're charging.
Good. So we'll open the floor up for questions. Alderman Young?
Is there any kind of guarantee from either company? I mean, Memphis Light, Gas, and Water has 77,000 lights they're going to upgrade. Where would that put us in the chain of events versus how long PATH would take or tell us it would take to do that?
Yeah, so I can touch on that point. So the Collierville also, an adjacent community, is also pursuing, at the same time they're pursuing this LED conversion. So the plan as it stands, and of course this could change, would be to kick this off July 1 if we went with PATH. So they'd essentially order the equipment, have all the lights in. We're guessing anywhere from 90 to roughly 180 days, you know what I mean, to get that process in so we could have it done. 3 months essentially to get the product in, another worst case scenario, 3 months to get it installed. But it all kind of varies based on supply chain issues, as you know. We would like to be able to pursue that with Collierville because we think it would cut down on some of the overhead as far as purchasing the equipment because you're making a larger purchase. MLG&W, we asked them that same question. They said that they thought they could begin pursuing this option in Q4 of this year, and they believe that it would only take a few weeks to get it completed. But again, we haven't moved forward with that. At this point, it's kind of in limbo. We're still discussing that annual investment cost that I mentioned with MLG&W and kind of going back and forth. So there's still some fine tuning that has to be done. But at this point, I think it'd be fair to say that if we'd get it done quicker with PATH, we'd start seeing cost savings faster with PATH. But again, the overhead is just going to depend on this final kind of as we negotiate further.
I believe there'd be some safety and security added to the city by having these brighter lights with the car break-ins and the car thefts. I got to believe a brighter neighborhood or parking, whatever, is going to add value for the citizens of Bartlett. I think it's something we really need to do.
I think it's something, Jack, that if we pass on, that sooner or later we could be forced to do it.
I agree.
At another price. I'm sorry, Alderman Griffin.
And this also includes the same lighting within the parks as well, not just streets and neighborhoods, correct?
Yeah, so this would include all parking lots that are in our parks, also all the walking trails. The only exclusion here would be sports lighting at this point. Everything else would be included.
Which I think that's an important point to make as well. Thanks.
Alderman Quinn.
Hey, okay, so I was there for the PATH. We were there for the PATH discussion last year. But I can't remember how long the contract was. Do you remember the length on that and what guarantee we had if PATH goes out of business? that we would still have all these agreements in place with somebody?
Well, as it stands, the only thing PATH would be doing at this point would be installing those fixtures.
Yeah.
Once the fixtures are installed, we would actually pay for some bulk supplies that we would give over to MLG&W, but the maintenance falls back in MLG&W. So as soon as PATH were to complete this, so assuming they don't go out of business in the next 6 to 8 months, they've completed the project, and now it's back to MLG&W because they're still providing the electricity to run these lights.
Right, and that's part of the that's part of the maintenance agreement we talked about.
That's correct.
10% a year or whatever.
That's
whatever
correct.
it is. So that's them maintaining it. So we're just paying PATH for quicker installation, more of a guarantee of installation.
That's right, and also to reduce that annual investment cost, that 10.4% that we're now paying on those depreciated assets, it essentially wipes that out because we're paying for it up front.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
It just keep in mind, these are the numbers that we have right now. We're still in negotiation with them. So negotiations are ongoing. We're still getting some information back from Light, Gas, and Water. So we think this is what we'll. As of today, we think these are the numbers we have as of today. Alderman King.
So, Mayor, Dick, if we use Memphis Light, Gas, and Water, you really got to add $100,000 to their because we'll lose $100,000. So their fee, so $100,000 would be added to their cost if we use them.
Yeah, and it's my understanding. You think Memphis Light, Gas, and Water? They have a third party that's actually doing that for them.
Okay.
And in that discussion too. There's 77,000 lights. They started down in Westwood and getting good feedback from there. And I can't remember, I think they had 3 or 4. Yeah, in downtown around the FedEx Forum because of that. But they're talking about adding additional crews and bringing additional crews in to beef up to get through that quicker. That would help. How quick those additional crews can come in would determine how quick on us. Robert, Alderman Griffin.
You mentioned Memphis has got 77,000. How many do we have?
8428.
8428 to top up there.
Great, thank you.
Can I just ask one question for clarification, if I could? So this basically is going to be $60 per year per house, right? And it'll be affixed to to basically their water bill, right?
Yes, sir.
How do we keep?
Just a second, Dave. Did you say it'd be affixed to the water bill?
Is it the water bill?
Yeah, it'd be on the
okay.
water bill.
All right.
Yep. So my question is, we all pay for MLGW. We pay our bill every month, and sometimes it's exorbitant, and sometimes it's decent. How do we reconcile the fact that we pay MLGW for service and lights and all that, but we're having to pay Bartlett an extra $60 a year for lights? You see what I'm saying? We're going to have to be able to reconcile what MLGW provides and then what we're providing. Do we own the light fixtures? Or are we just upgrading the light fixtures on the pole? MLGW still, at the end of the day, owns them, but we're basically billing them separately.
Yeah, so Eric, if you go back to that slide that showed the comparison, I'll kind of break this down just a little bit to make sure. So the poles, the wirings, the equipment, that's MLG&W's, right? And they require us to pay 10.41% of maintenance on those poles, period. So that's where that maintenance fee comes from. So what we're proposing to do essentially with PATH is to buy back the depreciated asset of the fixture itself at the 1.2, right, and then pay PATH to put on the new fixtures. So we wouldn't pay a depreciated amount for the light fixture itself. What we are still paying for, and which wouldn't change, would be the poles themselves and obviously the electricity that they use. That's the reason that amount is in there.
So we're expediting changing out the fixtures. Is MLGW charging us a fixture or some type of fee for fixture? I mean, my concern is we're going to do this, and they're going to charge us for something similar at MLGW on our bill, for whatever reason.
Yeah, well, I think that's the reason that at this point you're trying to look really hard at to make sure we get it all right.
Yeah.
But we'd enter into a new contract with them. In that new contract, there's a couple of things that we're looking to include, and I don't think there's any reason not to say it, is a part of when we're actually looking in the heads themselves. So, for instance, if a new neighborhood goes in, a pole goes down, we're going to ask, and they could deny it, it's still a part of the agreement that's ongoing, that they could send us that amount every year and essentially say, this is how much it costs for this pole, this is how much it costs to replace this, and we'd have the opportunity to pay for it then, as opposed to paying 10.4% of that depreciated asset essentially forever.
Yeah. Okay.
trying to get out of that as much as we can.
Yeah.
There's only so much we're going to be able to get out of because the poles themselves we're still having to pay for. And we did discuss that. We discussed the 10.41%, why we're paying that, why, you know what I mean, why it's so exorbitant. At this point, we've gotten a little wiggle room on it. And I'm not trying to say that to say that they weren't helpful, because they were. They were very open. They were very, accommodating. But that is something that's still there.
Yeah, I mean, support changing the light fixtures out, and I know expediting it gets us cost savings sooner,
sure,
particularly in operations. So there's a balance here, But also, I don't want MLGW double charging our citizens while we're replacing a street fixture, and they're charging them for the same street fixtures, in their bill, and they can't see it because of the way that the bill is created.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and that's one thing that didn't come up when we talked. The contract specifically was us and what we're paying back for maintenance. It wasn't necessarily what cost would be there, and that's a good question that we could ask, especially in light of what the mayor just said. They've got 77,000 lights that they're replacing, and is every citizen going to essentially pay for it? How's that going to be rolled into those bills? That I don't know.
But John, correct me if I'm wrong. I can understand their poll, and we're paying that over there, but in some sense they're kind of doing that something to some degree with some of the citizens are with their sewer and water bills now. Because the city of Memphis has water and sewer lines in here, and then we're passing through it too. We're passing the same through for 62% of the people do have streets part of their sewer. So the Alderman King, did you have your hand up?
I thought you were going to, Alderman Reeves, I thought you were going to ask about will we own the asset. I thought that's what you're kind of leading to, right? Yeah. Will we ever own those heads?
Well, in this scenario, we would own the heads if PATH did it.
With PATH.
Right, so if PATH were to do it. Now, at this point, MLG&W, we're, again, still talking, but if they allowed us the opportunity to buy those heads, they would essentially theirs, if we go back to that one screen, it would be cheaper, you know what I mean? But they're wanting to charge us the 10.4%, which is essentially what we're discussing right now, is the maintenance, you know what I mean, that we're required to pay.
Yeah.
So under past model, we're buying the lights,
right,
we're putting in the fixtures, and the only thing that we're paying back to MLG&W is for the pole wiring and equipment for that 10.4%, and basically the electricity, the energy, if you will, that we use to run them.
Okay, because last year when we had the discussion, I remember, I can't remember if it was me or somebody else that asked about if damage happens to them, because if there's a vehicle crash and somebody said, oh, well, your insurance company is supposed to pay for that, but if it's just an act of God or something, do we pay MLG&W for a new head and everything? And
that's what they tell us that the
maintenance is just the bulbs.
Yeah, that's what the 10.4% is essentially covering for the pole. Okay, and what we're asking is going forward, which we will put in this contract. And again, it doesn't mean that they're going to agree to that, but at this point, that's what that 10.4 covers. So there's no additional cost that comes to us. Pole gets damaged, something happens, everything that you described, it's covered in that 10.41% of maintenance. That's what's covering that cost. In the event that we were able to do this, we would try to negotiate it to where annually they sent us a list and basically said, over the course of last year, X, Y, and Z, we had to replace.
An actuary.
Right, and that cost is X. And we would have then the opportunity to pay for it then, as opposed to having to pay 10.4% forever. You know what I mean? It'd be cheaper, obviously, on us to handle it at one time than pay for it continually.
And I asked that question in the meeting, too, and their claim ratio on those automobile accidents is 100 to none, but unless the car stalls and it's there, most times it's a hit and run, and you never can tie the two together. So, in that, we've discussed that 10.41%, 6 ways to Sunday, and it goes on for infinity. So, and that's why we're trying to pursue, can we just pay an actuary?
Yeah.
And I think,
yeah. Well, the concern was just, if it's our asset, we're having to maintain that forever, and we're responsible for everything that happens to it, and then, so that's just a long-term concern.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, the only thing that I would say, and help me out with this probably by the time we finish voting on this, if MLGW is charging all of us for street light replacement to LED across the entire group, then we will be paying a premium. Because we'll be double paying for, you see what I'm saying? They're going to be charging us for street light replacement. We're going to be paying for our own on the fixture replacement.
You mean charging individuals?
No, but they spread the cost across all of the MLGW customers. So we still pay for it in MLGW bill, and then we're turning around and we're paying for it private. So I'm just saying that we got to think about both of those as we're having the conversation. Just to, in all fairness of transparency, are we as MLGW customers getting billed for all that in our light bill, and then we're turning around and replacing those heads and paying for it basically again?
No, so the way I understand it is the maintenance we're paying for no matter what. That's what the city
maintenance is paying no matter what.
Your question is, when they do these upgrades, as an MLGW customer for upgrades that happen wherever, are they going into your bill? And of course, I can't answer that, but that's a question that we can ask with MLGW when we talk to them next to figure out, are they expecting a rate increase for all customers as a result of it? And they may have already answered it. So
yeah,
we just got to weigh that out, David.
Yeah,
because you just got to weigh that out, because if you don't do it, they're going to do it, and be in full control, and you don't want that final number is either. So, but it's a good question.
I just want the real number. There's a real number, and maybe we don't know what it is, but we at least have to know that.
In talking to them, I'm not sure.
This is about shoring up the street aid fund. To be honest with you, shoring up the street aid fund, and basically accelerating the move to LED for cost savings overall for the city. And that makes sense to me. But the real cost of it probably is, I know what this looks like, but if MLGW is also charging us as part of that broader projects, then we're basically getting hit twice.
Well, I think the thing to point out here is we know.
Doing it now.
Yeah, it could be doing it now.
Yeah, we don't know. And the one thing we did ask for them to provide, and I know the town of Carville did as well, to ask for, to provide basically what that's going towards, what that maintenance is going toward currently. We do not have that. But the only thing I would keep in mind, the mayor alluded to it, if MLG&W were to decide that they want to convert everything to LED, which would probably be in their best interest to do over time, right? Like, you look at the number there as what the city pays, essentially after that, and there's nothing out of our pocket in that point, but what we pay annually is going to only reduce by $38,000 from what we're doing right now. So, and that's what you're trying to avoid, is no matter what, it's going to happen. I mean, potentially, and it's just a question of what's going to be in the best interest of the city for us to do it. And at this point, with the numbers that we have currently, I think PATH would be the most cost-effective way to do it, and then we're trying to find a way to offset the recurring maintenance that no matter what we do is not going to stop.
Alderman Quinn.
I guess something I haven't heard in all those discussions, even in the past with PATH, is MLG&W going to do this anyway in Bartlett? And that way we wouldn't even have to pay the $1.2 million to buy that.
Well, I don't know if they're going to do it at all, but I think I would assume that would be the plan. It would make sense to me as a business person to try to get them all converted to LED, right? But as of right now, as it shows right here, if we were to allow MLG&W to do it, that number's not going to change. So it's going to cost more. They're not charging us that $1.2 million anyway. So even if you reduce that $1.2 million out, look at the 20 years over there. Like, look at the 20 years over there. Take $1.2 million and subtract that from 3.3. The amount is still greater for PATH than it is for MLG&W. So no matter what, if we forecast this out over 20 years, whether MLG&W did it, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, as you're proposing, it's still, with the numbers that we have right now, would be cheaper for the city to go the PATH route than it would be the MLG&W route. That could change, but even subtracting the 1.2, you see where the number, you know what I mean? You see.
Well, I guess I'm asking is MLG&W, would they not convert us to LED anyway?
But even if they did, my point is we're going to have to pay that $437,000 every year. So if they converted us, okay, they're going to charge us for it. So that's what they're going to charge us.
So Millington, everybody who, if MLG&W just came in Millington, and, for example, and said, we're going to change all your lights to LED.
Right.
Give us $1.2 million for the heads. I mean, is that what they're going to come around and do?
Again, I'm not MLG&W.
I just was wondering. I'm sorry to really get into the depth on this, but I'm kind of wondering now, like, hey, if they're going to change all their customers over anyway, we could save everything.
So for the depreciated asset, TVA is going to require you to pay for that depreciated asset.
So TVA is going to make every municipality or unincorporated.
Right, I didn't say that. We're not MLG&W. Okay, so
no, but MLG&W serves Shelby County. So even unincorporated Shelby County where there's a street light, you're saying they're going to make Shelby County pay the depreciation fee?
It's an assumption. I do not know how that would go, and I'm sure President McGowan or someone from MLGW to explain their plan. I'm sure right now they're trying to get their 77,000 lights converted.
I mean, it sounds like a great way to make some money, because they're just going to throw them in a pile somewhere. They're not going to put those old mercury vapor switch it somewhere. I'm sorry.
No, he's good. You're good. You're good, Alderman Quinn.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I thought you were telling me to be quiet. Oh, because Bobby's waving at me and he's like, Ted said shut up. I was like, wow, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were on the MOGW board or something, or have a. He loves Ted Jardick loves the MOGW. I'm sorry. No. Yeah. Sorry.
I understand what you're saying. I think you're asking a lot of questions that we're not going to have.
Yeah, I'm sorry to get into the depth on that, but the more Alderman Reeves was talking, I'm like, hey, wait a minute. Are they going to come around and force everybody? Because what about unincorporated Shelby County and all these other places? And
in all fairness, this will make this stronger. So this process makes it stronger.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry.
No problem. Anybody
okay,
else
Ted,
any
I'm done.
questions?
Thank you.
Ted, did you get your screen on? No, they're working on it. Okay, all right. I think we've been in questions. Is there any more questions on street LED lights?
Sorry. No, we need to add to the budget about these screens, I guess. Put that in the street fund.
Quick. Dick, solid waste. I'm sorry, Steve, who's doing it? Dick, moving to solid waste.
Okay, solid waste fund is a self-supporting special revenue fund. It receives revenue from some sources. If you look on page 6 and 7 of your budget handout, you see the operations of the solid waste fund. Purchases of capital assets are pay-as-you-go and have been for the last number of years, ever since I've been with the city. We used to issue debt for these type purchases, but we stopped that and used pay-go purchases of capital assets. So if you see in the general debt service fund transfers from solid waste, that's old debt that the solid waste fund is assisting to help the debt service fund pay off its debt. So with that, I'm going to turn it over.
Hey, Dick, before you do, just 1 second about when we implemented the $25 to $30.
$25 to $30, it was about 4 or 5 years ago when we increased it.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just saying, going forward, you can see that this, I think we'll have to revisit that in the near future, but we've been 3 or 4 years into that increase there, and you can see just by what we're fixing to hear from a lot of these costs that it's an expensive proposition to do. So you get you back on track, getting mad up if you want, Dick.
If you look on page 7 of the handout, you'll note net from operations in the solid waste fund for proposed next year. We're using almost $210,000 of fund balance to balance that, and obviously we can't continue to do that over a number of years. So maybe in the future we have to revisit solid waste fees. But this time I'd like to turn it over to Matt Crenshaw to talk about the capital purchases in the solid waste fund.
Thank you, Mayor and Board.
Eric, did he leave? Is he still here? Is Eric down there?
No, he's gone. He's
okay. I was going to get him to blow that one screen. Can you blow that other screen up when he gets to it? Penny? The next one? That one?
Primarily on the right side of it.
Yeah.
So, as y'all are aware, we operate, we're one of only a few in the area that operate a fully operational solid waste facility that includes a transfer station with our own tipping floor. And so besides the city of Memphis, we're the only ones in the county, actually in probably the tri-state area, that do that. So with that being said, there's a lot that goes along with that, and a lot of need for equipment and manpower and other things. And so as you can see, the slide that Penny's showing us here, these are the last several years that we've been able to keep up with the equipment. And if you'll scroll over to the right side in red, and just the column just to the left of that, FY23, that was the equipment that we were able to get in FY22 on the tail end of that. And so a lot of that equipment that we ordered then is still out. We haven't received it yet. And so the stuff in red is the FY24 things that we are asking to purchase. And Eric, if you'll go to the next slide, I'll elaborate on that. And so we're asking for two vehicles and two pieces of equipment. So the first one is an automated packer. We use these every day. They're on the street. At least 12 to 15 of them are on the street every day. We have a couple that we have in reserve for when things break, and which happens fairly often. There's a lot of moving parts on all of this equipment. This particular truck here is one that we've had for a number of years. It's one that we acquired not long after we started the automated collection that we do now. Move on to the knuckle boom truck, which is basically like a claw truck. We use that on our routes every day. We have two sets of those trucks. Some of them do the brush collection, yard waste and things like that, and then the other set they pick up what we call bulk items, which is things that are larger outside of the garbage carts, that are larger, that we don't ask the guys to pick up, which would be couches and furniture and just large items like that goes to the landfill but doesn't go to recycling. 3 is the leaf machine. This is like one of our first leaf machines when we started the loose leaf collection program many years ago. This machine, as you can tell, is 25 years old, and we're in desperate need to replace that one. It has a lot of wear and tear on it. And 4th is the walking floor trailer, which is so back to the transfer station part. We have a tipping floor, which the household garbage collection is dumped on the floor and pushed off into these trailers and then transferred to the landfill. This keeps our trucks that are out on the route from having to direct haul to the landfill. And so we use these trailers. This particular trailer has been in service for 20 years. It's one of the original trailers that we purchased whenever we started the transfer station many years ago. And so that's pretty much all I have. Questions?
Alderman Young?
Matt,
Yes, sir.
explain to me again about the 480,700 miles. I'm not sure I understand. Where you're talking about the automated refuse truck, the mileage is at 86,000 with 19,228 hours.
That's correct. So what you got to consider is these trucks stop and go quite often, and so they're sitting there. When they're sitting there, the engine is revving to lift the arm and dump it in the truck. The same way with the knuckle boom. So you have to equate hours into that. So for every for every hour that's on that piece of equipment, you can add 25 miles to that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any questions?
Oh, man. I can't believe it.
We should get you up here first, Matt.
Matt,
I usually like to be first. So.
Matt, I got 25 questions here for you, but
hit me.
Well, I will say this while you're up here, Matt. Sorry, I mean recognize. I mean that truck is unrepairable anyway. There's no parts available. So,
that's correct.
Yeah, so
that's correct.
That and I've seen that one before. It looks pretty antique.
That's right.
But also, you know, the leaf machines I think are one of the biggest interesting things to me because there's no telling how many hours are on those things, how many hours the crews spend. I'd love to know sometime, just out of curiosity, you know, what it costs us to do the leaf program, because I know some people, I'm not gonna say what neighborhood, but they practically have the trucks there all the time. They have a huge amount of leaves, you know. So, and I know those things catch on fire sometimes, and they just wear out. So,
they do.
You know, I commend y'all for trying to keep those going, because I know people are really excited about having their leaves sucked up. They're very serious about that. So, I don't see
very expensive.
It is very expensive, yeah. I mean,
Yes.
they're very expensive, so, I hope the day doesn't come where we have to take a look at that, Alderman Reeves.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'll just say this.
Thank you, Matt.
I am an equal opportunity offender, but the reality is I've been through Public Works and I've got to see the operation there. So I don't really have a whole lot of questions because really Public Works is a core service of what we offer.
Mm-hmm.
It's the areas of the city where I don't see it as a core service where, at times that I spend a lot of time asking questions. So this one is one that I really think is a core service, and probably, if anything, you're probably underfunded a little bit. So we can talk about that.
Remember that.
I know I stepped out of the room, but Christie's picture of the building, did you hit on the roof?
No, sir, we didn't include that. That's going to come in this budget.
Yeah, you may want to explain that you'll see it in, there is a request for the roof. Maybe we'll just briefly hit where that's at and why.
That's correct. We asked for a roof repair. I think it's $67,000. You'll see that. So our general maintenance office building and water wastewater services, they share a building. It's 40 years old now. It's a metal roof. It is in disrepair. We've patched on it for many years. The building has been added on to, I think, 3 times, which has some valley gutters and some things like that in there that are just they're in disrepair, and it's to the point now where we're going to need a new roof for it. So
any questions on that roof? It's in the okay, good.
It's at Alturia down here. It's our maintenance building in the back. If you go through the gate, it's the building on the right. So it's across the drive from the old shop. Yes, sir.
I have one more question. So, can you tell me what the metal building is for? Is that a shrine for the old garbage truck?
The metal building, that's actually, so our trucks obviously require, we try to hit things off before they get big, and so our fleet services goes out every morning. We have 2 mechanics that go out every morning to solid waste, kick the tires, so to speak, check the oil, and do all that stuff. They actually do tire change outs in the morning before the guys hit the routes. That metal building is for our city shop to work under when it's raining and cold and things like that, so they can change those tires out and they're not sitting right out.
Okay, yeah, because I didn't know if that was storage for some of the.
No,
because everything's out in the open all the time, right?
Right, that's correct.
Yeah, that's going to be hard on them too.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Matt.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Phoebus, Special Revenue Funds.
Special Revenue Funds, this hopefully be a brief presentation. We do have, if you look in your booklet, pages 9 and 10 involve the Drug Enforcement Fund and the Federal Drug Enforcement Fund. They're basically operated by the police department. Revenues are from drug enforcement fees, civil settlements, and DEA drug fines. Operations include the DARE program, public awareness and prevention, and certain equipment. I believe that we have purchased police vehicles out of these funds in the past and will continue to do so as the resources are available. Drainage Fund, on page 12 of your booklet, we spoke to you about this already. We have a transfer of $100,000 from the general fund to assist in operation of this fund. It has 1 employee plus benefits and expenses. And City Bartlett, again, is the only city in the county that does not have a drainage fee imposed. So that may be something we need to look at in the future. Parks Improvement Fund, again, it's on page 12. We have a little bit of development fees revenue coming in with no proposed expenditures for FY24.
Hey, Dick, could I just make a comment there while we're on parks? That we are implementing, we haven't redone our parks master plan since 2007. And I've told Shan we're going to implement that, so we're starting the process on updating our master plan for the parks. And again, it's kind of like the street deal. Out of that master plan, we'll find the priorities, adjust the capital, make sure we're spending the dollars in the right areas that the citizens are looking for. So, proceed on.
Question about that?
Yes, sir.
Just briefly. On that master plan, is that being done internally, or are we going to have somebody come in and talk about park usage, park needs, based upon a future state?
Yeah, so it's going to be a pretty thorough process. They're working with a professor out of Wake Forest to try to develop a long-term plan. That'll involve employee surveys, that'll involve feedback from this board. I think everybody should be involved in what we want to see in our parks, and more specifically what we want to see in our athletics, because I think both of those coincide.
All right, cool.
Proceed, Dick.
E-citation fund is another special revenue fund of the city. Doesn't have much revenue. We get about $16,000 a year. This was created by the state 5 or 6 years ago. The court's allowed to charge $5 for each citation that results in a conviction. $4 goes to the police department, $1 retained by the city court clerk. And TCA code says that this fee will sunset after 5 years. And we are in our 4th year currently, so FY24 will be the 5th year for Bartlett. So whether or not that actually expires after 24, we'll have to determine that at a future date. Now we turn to any questions regarding those funds.
Hey, Dick, could you just elaborate? I think there is a way to extend that possibly. Could you enlighten them a little bit about that on the fund?
I've heard that some other cities are looking into that possibility, but I've not spoken to anyone.
Okay, all right.
In that regard.
One question, if you don't mind. Electronic traffic citations, what is that?
Pardon me?
What's an electronic traffic citation?
It's collected, charged by the police officers that makes a stop.
We'll let Chief Cox answer that. He may know a little something about it. Okay.
Back in the day when I used to write tickets, we used to have a pad of paper that we'd have to go, and it'd be 3 carbon copies where if you ever received a ticket, I'm not sure if you ever have, but if you ever received a ticket, they would ask you to press so you have 3 copies. We went to electronic ticketing. It's a computer-based ticketing, so when an officer stops you or you're at a traffic accident, he has to write you a citation. He can write it on his pad, and it electronically sends it to the court clerk's office, and it prints out a receipt like a regular receipt would for the violator, and so it saves time and money and gets people back on the street.
Okay, thank you.
The fee itself goes toward purchasing things like the electronic equipment that's needed by the police department and also the city clerk's office. Any other questions on the special revenue funds? If not, we'll turn it over to John Horn again to discuss water and sewer needs of the city and what we plan on doing in the near future. Thank you, John.
Do I get another hour and 20 minutes?
Yeah.
Eric, if you could go to the overall map, if you don't mind, the next one. And let me start there. Just real quickly, back in 2012, you may know the city of Memphis was hit with what's called a consent decree by EPA to fix the problematic sewers in the system. And this is called the SARP 10, by 2018, 2019, they had contacted us and had identified areas in the city of Bartlett that they felt were problematic to their sewer system. And so this map, as you can see here, the blue areas shown on the map that are shaded in blue are the areas that have historically flowed south to the city of Memphis, out of Bartlett, into the city of Memphis. The area to the west is Harrington Creek, and the area that is outlined in a thick red bold line is our Fletcher Creek sewer basin. So in 2019, the city of Memphis made several requests of us as the city of Bartlett to do. And those were in the form requesting us to build 3 sewer holding tanks to hold back the sewer in certain areas of Bartlett to where it wouldn't cause them problems. And so if you can, what I'm going to ask Eric to do is go back to the previous slide, which is going to zoom in to, it's the area that, there you go, right there. Thank you, Eric. And in this slide, one of the requests that Memphis made was for us to install 2 sewer holding tanks in the area of the Tennessee Baptist Children's Home. And of course, the Union Depot project, that's going to accommodate that request by Memphis in that the developer is going to install those 2 holding tanks as a part of that project, which is great. And that's going to accommodate not only Union Depot's sewer needs, but it's also going to accommodate some of the surrounding upstream developments as well, which is greatly helpful. Now, what those holding tanks will not accommodate the Bailey Wiener track, which has a yellow star on it. And so we have, for a number of years, have been doing some sewer modeling in this area and also coordinating with Memphis to get agreement with Memphis on how to accommodate this potential development of this track. And so what we're proposing as a part of this year is some future work, and the first part of that is the installation of a new sewer line right where you see the arrows is a new 15-inch sewer line. Now this is within the city of Memphis, but as this sewer line is installed, it will accommodate the Bailey Wiener track for full development. So that's one of the goals of this year. And then if I could, I want to move back to the larger map. Thank you, Eric. And then we have the rest of Fletcher Creek sewer basin. And I'm going to move to the 3rd holding tank that City of Memphis requested us to install, which at the time, about 3 years ago, they had estimated the size of that would be 6 million gallons. And so the rest, that would serve the rest of the Fletcher Creek sewer basin, basically all the way to New Brownsville Road. Now, as you know, that portion of the Fletcher Creek sewer basin includes a lot of large tracts, so there's a lot of potential in this basin for development. The Fogelman tract is in there, the Vescovo tract, a number of other tracts that we have discussed. And so what we have out right now is an RFQ to select a consultant to do 2 things. Number 1 would be to design the 15-inch line that I mentioned just a moment ago. And then the other portion of this proposal would be to begin modeling the rest of the Fletcher Creek sewer basin. And what I mean by modeling that, to set up flow meters all over this basin and to begin actually collecting data on how much flow we have going through our Fletcher Creek basin. And that way for the future, we'll be able to potentially design this larger holding tank that would not only satisfy Memphis's concern, but it would also open up this basin for future development.
So,
I got a question.
We want Paul's here for questions. Steve,
Yeah.
probably. Yeah.
How long do you anticipate this study to take?
The sewer flow study needs a minimum of 3 months, and the reason why that is part of our issue with sewer flows is aging infrastructure, and we get infiltration. Anytime it rains, we get water entering the sewer lines, and that takes up capacity. And so the sewer meters, once those get installed, we really need to let those go through a season of rain, dry months, wet months, and to see how that trends in the sewer flows. Because we all know during the rainy season, those flows are going to go up. During the summer, those flows are going to go down. And so we need that information to properly design those holding tanks.
Well, I guess my question is, how long is it going to be before we can open up some of these areas we're talking about for new development? Because I think with Blue Oval City and the other things going on, we need to get this open as soon as we can.
Hey, could I interrupt, John, just a second? Jack, if you see, the bottleneck, the two lines come to the furlong. We just got back that modeling. We just got that modeling done. Okay. That modeling's done, and John's referring to the modeling to the next right era. Okay. And over there. Right. And
thank you. So for the bottleneck, as soon as we select a consultant, we can go to design on that very quickly. Okay. On the modeling of the rest of the basin, that's going to take at least 3 months, maybe 6 months to get all that data back and to begin the, I would say, the potential design on that holding tank.
And then there's construction of that.
And then there's construction.
So you're a year to year and a half away before we're really opening things up.
That's a fast track.
And we have to find a location.
Right, I understand.
That was going to be my question. Where do you see that going?
That is a big question. And so is that going to be on one specific site in a traditional tank? Or there's the other possibility that we could build this 6 million gallon tank like a pipeline, like a large, to give you an example, the Union Depot holding tanks are going to be built out of 11-foot diameter pipe. And so they're building the tank like a pipeline. And so that is a possibility we're looking at right now, is running a pipeline along Fletcher Creek and build it potentially as we go, as development requires it.
Let me interject this too, is going back to the 6 million gallons. I've asked the question, how did you determine that number? And they based it on the current zoning that's in that district now. So all of these, just like with Union Depot, it was an estimate of what they thought it would be. That's why we had to put the flow meters on there to do an actuary. That's what we're doing now, is doing those actuaries so we can determine how much flow is actually coming. And while that's going, I plan on working in conjunction with the property owners out there to see if the current zoning is the way they intend to use that property, so that we don't overbuild or underbuild. We know what the use is. One of the things in the meeting with Mayor Strickland, they said that they would allow us now to still build one big tank, which way it was, that they'd allow us to phase it in. Yes, we need it. Well, yes. So that was one of the things that we had good conversation, mutually agreed on, is phasing that in right there. And they was very excited that we're willing to take the initiative to find out exactly what those needs are out there, so that we have some real numbers to talk about. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it'd take the thunder away. There's John.
If I'm not careful, the mayor's going to take my job.
No, sir. Alderman Quinn.
Hey, I know we're all tired of talking about sewers. I feel like that's all we talked about last year, was sewers. The bottleneck, now, has anything changed? I mean, that was the original bone of contention between the previous administration, right, and City of Memphis was the bottleneck, replacing that. Has anything changed in that they still just want the new pipes in Memphis?
John, I'm not sure it was just exclusive to the bottleneck.
Well, I mean, I know that was part of it. I know, but it was also, but I mean, that was something that obviously really had to be done, that they knew, they were certain of about the pipes, right?
Yeah, in the initial assessment, the bottleneck was a problem, and the part of the solution was going to be the two holding tanks. Of course, when we gave them the needs of Union Depot, an extremely dense development, that quickly was not going to be enough. Two holding tanks was not going to be enough to accommodate Union Depot. And then, of course, we saw a potential site plan for the Bailey Wiener, and it was a very dense project as well. So it kind of blew that original assessment out of the water, and the project grew not just from two holding tanks to the need for an installation of a new line to accommodate both of those developments.
Right, but the line is something we can do fairly quickly and get that going while Union Depot is putting their tanks in.
Yes, I
Because it's
believe
not going to
so.
stop Union Depot, of course.
No.
Okay, so we'll just go ahead and do that, and then once those tanks are in, then you'll be modeling those tanks also.
Right, that's correct.
Okay, so they'll be modeling as they're putting buildings into the area, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right, thank you.
To kind of give you a perspective, Kevin, I think that's about 3,000 linear feet. Was it 3,000?
How many?
It's around 3,000 is the number I remember, of what you're seeing there in the green
Takes it all the
line.
way down to Reese Road.
Mm. Okay. Alderman Reeves?
What's the cost of the new sewer pipe to fix the bottleneck? What are we looking at?
We've got an engineer's opinion of cost. It's very general, somewhere around $3 to $4 million.
Okay. So what is the, if I could ask the CAO, and maybe you have this, maybe you don't, but you know it's probably coming, what's the return on investment? If we ask the taxpayers to put in $3 million to fix this pipe, what is the potential net economic impact for the city?
Well, let me just say this. We're going to negotiate that with the city of Memphis, and we're hoping that we can partner on that.
Well, no, well, I get it, but at the worst case, it's $3 million. What is the net economic impact? How long does it take for us to get our money back for that project? I mean, this type of question you ask in business, right? I mean, we're going to invest. What does it really mean economically for us?
It's a good question. I can't answer what it's going to bring because I don't know where that star is going. I just know if we don't do that, nothing's going there. What I guess the reverse of that is, what is it going to cost to do nothing?
Well, what I'm saying is, are we going to put a church on that property and not get anything? I mean, you see what I'm saying? I mean,
well, we've had in previous administration, they've had grocery stores.
Yeah.
The grocery stores looking there. It's a multifaceted property that's got a lot of good options.
Okay.
That's going in there that could generate a lot of sales tax revenue.
Yeah, I'm not saying we don't do it. I
know.
You see what I'm saying? We put in a pipe and then we wind up putting something out there that doesn't generate any tax revenue.
It opens up other opportunities too, because down Kirby Whitten and some more of the areas around that, because the effluent that was on the two tanks was based solely on Union Depot usage, and those actuaries are done just for a Union Depot.
Yeah.
So unless we do something there, it won't open up those opportunities. I think that star is about 32 acres, John, and it's a very prime piece of property that fronts on 64 and on 70.
What's it zoned currently? Commercial or agricultural? It's commercial.
I'd have to ask him, but I can get back with you on it.
Okay, that's fine.
Did somebody say they knew over here?
Oh, I just was saying, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but because we talk about who all it will serve, the new pipe was needed before Union Depot was brought forward, right?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
What was proposed and requested by Memphis was the two holding tanks that are going to be built as a part of Union Depot.
But I mean, before Union Depot, they realized that pipe was a problem, though.
They did.
Yeah, okay. That's what I was kind of getting at, is it was already going to serve a large area. There was already a problem, right, even before, so.
It was. The answer for Memphis was putting tanks in, not necessarily installing the pipe, though.
Okay, thank you.
That was one of the options that was on the table in talking about that. But right now, those two holding tanks that they're putting in, it's all about Union Depot.
Mayor, I think you're right. I don't think it's a stretch to say that the meetings that we have had on the Bailey Wiener track, they were stifled because of the lack of sewer access.
Mm-hmm. And I've had several people in the Industrial Development Park that's looking at the property across from the TCAT Academy. That's the first thing that comes up there. It was 40 acres there. They says we don't have people or we don't have the sewer.
My thing is, Mr. Mayor, if we're going to invest that amount of money in that track, we want to make sure that property is used to generate property and sales tax.
Absolutely. We wouldn't even have a discussion if it could.
Yeah, but it's, I'm sorry to interject, but it's also going to affect up there, Yale and Summer, the developments, the residential developments that can't go in because they don't want to put the holding tank in a neighborhood.
That's one of the things that I really appreciate by Mayor Strickland in our meeting, because even the little property up there between Pinnacle Bank and the drugstore,
Yeah.
That couldn't even be, they wanted to build 2 or 3 years ago and couldn't, and Mayor Strickland graciously said, I'll let that one go into there, proving the point that it was all about Union Depot. And there's a couple of other ancillary properties up there, up Kirby Whitten, there that open up too. So that in our opinion, that was the quickest. That was really the place that we could generate sales tax and generate economic development in a prompt manner.
Yeah, it's a low-hanging fruit, right? You can go. Yeah.
Yes. So and believe me, I'm trying to move it expeditious as we can on the other part over there, because every day goes by, we're missing opportunity there. So, John, did I interrupt you?
No, sir.
Or no? Oh, was there any other questions for John? Thank you, John. And we're going to moving to the water sewer fund.
Go back to the water sewer fund. The repairs and improvements that John has talked about is about $30 million been estimated. At current rates have result in $2.2 million annual debt service, and this can only be funded out of utility fund resources. Would require an increase to accommodate the reviewed additions. You're talking about increase in depreciation when you install the product. You're talking about increase in interest rates, interest cost when you borrow the money. So all those increases going to affect how we pay for this improvements. In 2020, we added a $2 base charge. This is sewer only, to cover some increase from the city of Memphis. They've already increased the rate that we have to pay to treat the sewer effective January 1 of this year. It's going to go up another $70,000 or $80,000 on an annual basis from what we're paying in the past. Water sewer fund is a separate fund. If you look on page 17 of your handouts, depreciation expense and interest expense on debt has to be covered. I'm sure all of you remember going through the program that the state put on as far as utility operations. There's a formula or equation that has to be resolved in order to be considered operationally functional. You have operating expense, which includes depreciation, plus non-operating revenues, plus capital contributions, TAPs, less operating expenses equals change in net position. And that's what the state looks at when they look at your financials each year. A change in net position, you should have a positive change each year. If you have a negative change for more than for 2 years in a row, you're subject to being called before the Wastewater Financing Board in Nashville. And if the city does not do anything about it, the state will do it for you, and you probably won't be very happy about what they want to do. So it's incumbent upon us to solve our situation in-house and not require the state to come in and change it for us. Water sewer fund faces significant challenges, as we just discussed. Increased costs for Memphis to treat the sewer, and there's an urgent need to improve the water sewer system infrastructure, as John has just talked about. We have a proposed increase in sewer rates only to help fund these infrastructure needs and debt service. If you look on the next page, the current rate comparison of sewer rates in Bartlett as compared to other cities across the nation and the state. You see that we're pretty much less than everyone else except for South Haven, Mississippi, in current rates. Additional 1,000 gallons for sewer treatment in Bartlett. We're lower than any other city in that top tier of comparisons. You look at the lower part, you look at the local sewer rate compared to cities within Shelby County. Currently, we're paying an average of $16.44 per month in sewer bill as part of the water utility bill that they get. And that compares with other cities across the table, Memphis, Collierville, Germantown, and others. If you go to the next page, the first barcode is current Bartlett sewer fees on average monthly bill of $16.44. You go across the page of what other cities charge. If we increase the sewer bill as we're proposing in this budget, average sewer bill would be $24.24. That's a little bit more than Germantown or Oakland, but less than Collierville, Memphis, Arlington, and Lakeland. So that was a proposal to increase the sewer fee. The last slide, or the next slide, shows the proposed budget for FY24, showing the increase in revenues going from $10 million to $12 million. That's the increase in the sewer fees. Other revenues on the cash basis, you look down about the last third of the page, show the debt service of $1.2 million and the transfer to capital improvement fund of $4.9 million. And that's to help pay for this initial bottleneck, 15-inch sewer line that we're talking about to alleviate some of the problems that we're having. It also includes some other funding for sewer pipes and other things that are included in the capital improvement program.
Mr. Mayor?
Just one second. If we go to questions, I'll refer to our CEO, Steve, for some additional comments.
Yeah, so I just want to break this down a little further. Like, there's no secret. Everybody in this room knows that we've had sewer constraints in the Fletcher Creek Basin. We know that. There's been a lot of strides to try to repair it, and what we're trying to do here by increasing these rates is essentially put together a long-term plan to get some return on the investment. And to answer the question from earlier, the return on the investment is boundless. Right? It's based on what we can bring in and what we can do. And in the 100-day press conference the mayor just had, we mentioned a partnership with Jones Hour through the chamber. Part of that partnership is to bring in new business, right? We want to bring in things that not only that our citizens want, but are also going to generate revenue, that we get that return that you're addressing. So the point here, although there is essentially a $7.80 increase for our average customer, for the average user, the return on that investment, again, I think is boundless. I think we could get so much out of this if we're able to get industrial businesses in here. We're able to get a lot of the things that we all want when we go out, we want to go shop, et cetera. I think Union Depot offers a great opportunity to do that. I think the Bailey property that we talked about adjacent to that offers a lot of opportunities, especially when we're talking about roughly 2,000 residents potentially being across the street. And then you look in our industrial park, and every day our planning department is getting requests from Blue Oval for supportive businesses that are looking for a home. Well, right now we can't give them a home. So the point is to lay out a plan so we have a home for them to land. And in addition to that, all of the other growth that's potentially in there as far as homes go, as you move further into that basin towards Davies Plantation, there's a lot of opportunity in there for us to build. And the other thing we continually hear is a need for homes, that everybody needs homes. So I think doing this, not only do we solve a problem that we've all been trying to fight for quite some time, but we could do so pretty quickly as John laid out. I mean, if we could have an answer in the short term for the bottleneck to open up everything with Union Depot as it comes online, and then in the long term develop a plan to basically do everything I just said, and bringing in those additional companies and expanding our residences, I think we're moving in the right direction.
This time we'll open the floor up for questions. Alderman Reese.
Just a statement. Okay. So number one, this particular fee has to be done. I mean, from my viewpoint, this is an investment that for the city is a significant return on investment long term for the community, and takes pressure off of the property tax rate, which everybody hates to see get touched. So to me, this one has to be done. Matter of fact, we're probably a little late to the party, but you know, it's okay. I think we need to figure out over time how do we gradually increase certain fees because the cost of things go up, right? That way it doesn't feel so painful at one time. But yeah, this one has a definitive return on investment. Even the street aid fund, even the street light one has a return on investment. And then putting money into paving roads has a significant impact on whether or not you have to take your car in for an alignment once a year, or you put a tire gets put out. So those all have direct expenses to the population. So I get all of these, but this one in particular has the biggest return on investment. I think we got to do it. So.
Anyone else? All right. Brad, did you? No. Okay. Was debt service?
Going forward to the general debt service fund.
Yep.
One of the highlights of the general debt service fund, or two actually, we have a TML variable rate note that was issued in 2008. It's the only variable rate note that we have. Others are fixed rate notes, bond issues. The payoff in the general fund for that variable rate note is $535,000, and we propose to pay that off this year. We've already sent letters to the TML bond pool requesting that be done, and we have until July the 25th to pay that off. And if it's not approved, of course, we won't pay it off, and we'll continue to pay annual principal and interest on that note. The other highlight is we're transferring $2.5 million from the debt service fund into the CIP fund for the street light project. It can be used for that purpose. So we're proposing to do that, and that does not affect long-term position really of the debt service fund, because we projected it out over the next 4 or 5 years. We still have a fund balance of around $2 million in the debt service fund, so that's sufficient for our purposes even after this transfer. Utility bond fund, utility debt service, obviously it's part of the utility fund operations funded by water and sewer revenues. The water fund also has a variable rate TML note, and the payoff of it is $396,000, which we propose to do in this budget. Any questions on the debt service fund?
No questions?
Moving forward to the capital improvement program, you've heard John's explanation of the needs in the water sewer fund. We're going to remove the annual paving from the CIP fund and make it a pay-go type purchase rather than issuing debt for it. Place that in State Street aid. We're using $4.932 million in water sewer retained earnings for the Fletcher Creek sewer basin design and modeling, various plant and pipe upgrades, and matching funds on an ARP grant from TDEC of $532,000 for that project. We also propose to issue roughly $4 million in GO debt for the streetlight project. And there are no other equipment or improvements proposed in the FY24 CIP fund.
Any questions? Alderman Young.
It's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, but American Rescue Plan is basically COVID relief. Is that not correct?
I'll let Mr. Phoebus answer that.
Isn't that part of the plan that President Biden put out to offset some of the losses from COVID? One of the things I heard yesterday was that Congress is talking about, in order to balance the budget and reduce spending, is eliminating some of those COVID dollars that have not been spent. So my only question is, do we need to think through that? I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if it does, that could have a big impact on what we're doing, couldn't it?
We have a plan for that. Dick, do you want to?
We have a balance of about $370,000 from our original ARP allocation. It's still in our budget, and we have a plan for use of that, and we'll be bringing a resolution to the board for that effect to spend those funds down. So,
Okay.
and we also have to make an annual accounting of the funds that we've spent, and we've made one last April 30. Next due date is April 30 of this year, and we'll be reporting what we've spent or obligated since that time over the period of the last year. So once that is done, we'll have $370,000 plus of available funding from ARP, and we're going to use that for projects this next year.
But are those dollars we have or dollars available for us to request and receive? Because if they stop it, there may not be any dollars to request and receive, is what I'm getting at.
We have already received them. They're in the bank, and
Okay.
we're going to obligate them.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? No more questions. I'd just like, Steve, would you like to say anything? We've worked hard to try to come in and look at our overhead and our revenue streams. We've looked we scrutinized everything that we've done, and while we do it, it's we're trying to move away from so much dependency on debt service and try to really get a clarity with a lot of the surveys. We're trying to be more efficient in making sure we're using the dollars in the right places. All of us went on the campaign trail and heard a lot of things on the trail, and I think this budget addresses almost all of those items we heard on the campaign trail. We're not through yet, and I just want everybody to know, and I heard transparency a lot over the campaign trail, and this is the first time we've had a budget meeting like this in an effort to try to make sure that we communicate. There's nothing to hide. We want you to know what we're doing, why we're doing it, and where we're doing it. And things will, there's a lot of other things that we're improving, but we've been here for quite a while now, and I just wanted to close with just saying thank y'all for spending this amount of time down here. And there are things still left that aren't done that we're still working on, such as the lights, but we're making an effort to try to do the right things at the right places and generate this economic impact of. There's a lot of opportunity as Steve just went out there. So thank y'all for sitting through the first presentation. And is there any comments or anything any of the aldermen would like to make in closing here? Alderman Reeves.
Just real quick, first of all, thank you and the administration. Thank you guys for coming down here. And I know it's tough to kind of be put in front of the firing squad, but that's our job. I mean, that's why people elect us to do this. And so that's why I do it. But thank you for this. I think this is a good budget. I mean, there's things about it that obviously some of us probably don't like, particularly on the revenue raising side. But I'll say this: to get to the final destination, we need to really consider the business that we're in and make sure that everything that we do as a city aligns to some type of core business. And I'm just asking for you guys to really look hard at those things that we do. Do they make sense anymore? Do we need to be in that business when we're trying to support sewer, we're trying to support roads, we're trying to support our first responders, and we're trying to give our employees as much as we can to support their quality of life? So please, as you guys kind of move forward, I'm interested in supporting this, even with the fee increases. But I'm also interested in you coming back to us with some ideas on things. Where are the gaps and where are we losing money that we can take care of over time? Because I know they're out there, and I know you guys know they're out there, and it may take some political conversations and political will to get it done, but there are places that we need to really consider what the future of that is within city government as an amenity when it conflicts with core services. So thank you for this. This is great. Appreciate the time.
So, David, I appreciate you saying that. because we have that same passion, and we're pursuing those options, and yet we hope to come to you very soon with some different perspectives. And I realize that there's some things that we've always done this way, and maybe some of those things need to continue to do that way. But we're open to hearing if there's other ways to accomplish the same goals that tie in with our core values, because the core value is we want everybody, all of our citizens, to realize that this is their hometown, and it's a great place to live, a great place to work, great place to retire, and a great place to raise your family. And I think as you look across the perspective as these other cities go through their budget, I feel like that I'm not concerned with what other cities do. We're concerned with what we do and how we do it here in Bartlett. And I think our intentions is to improve the quality of life for all of our citizens and doing it in an efficient and effective manner. I've always heard for years, what's the difference between efficiency and effectiveness? It's, yes, we got to get them both right. We got to do things right, and we got to do the right things. And so we're trying to identify those and be bringing them to y'all forward, and without getting any further into dues, Alderman Quinn.
I want to thank y'all. Sorry, I want to thank y'all for coming out again, even though Ted doesn't want me to talk as much. But I appreciate that. This has been great. Thank y'all both for doing this and for the care that you're putting into this budget. I mean, I know we're checking couch cushions for change, and I appreciate you doing that. Because just because it worked in the past doesn't mean it's going to work in the future. I think that's what we've all campaigned on last year, was talking about having a strong future for Bartlett, and Alderman Reeves is correct. There will be some pains to make these adjustments. There's things that have been done wrong in the past. In hindsight, you can see it now. But I do appreciate the effort that's being made, and I think we all look forward to seeing this budget as it's further fleshed out, and how we can have these debates about fees and services and things like that. And I appreciate all the department heads, coming forward with what you really want and need, and let's see if we can make all that happen for you, because I know you men and women all know best of what makes the city work better. So thank y'all.
Thank you, Alderman Quinn. Does anybody else have any comments? For the citizens that's watching us on YouTube, I'd just like to say that this board and this administration is working hard to ensure that our future looks bright, not only bright for you today, but for your grandchildren tomorrow. So with that being said, we'll call the budget meeting for, what's today? For April the 20th to close.